All right. Push one in the chat if you can hear me. All right. Thanks for the confirmation. Welcome back to the Black Brain Trust. This is episode 568, Black Geopolitics. Please hit the like button as you come in. Share the video if possible and hit that notification bell so you get all the updates from the Black Brain Trust, including those posted on the community tab. The docket and description need the video for you to follow along with. If you want to engage in this discussion, there'll be a link in the chat for you to click on. When you click on the link, make sure you raise your hand so that one of us can acknowledge you and advance you to the panel. Let me grab the link and then we can get started. All right, man. First item on the docket is from defensenews.com. To compete with China, an internal Pentagon studies looks to pour money into robot submarines. An internal study from the Office of the Secretary of Defense is looking to pour money into large robot submarines that the U.S. Navy says will free up its larger manned submarines for more complex missions. According to documents obtained by Defense News, a study spearheaded by Defense Secretary Mark Esper's internal think tank, the Cost Assessment and Program Evaluation Office, recommended the Navy invest in as many as 50 extra-large unmanned underwater vehicles to massively boost the number of eyes the military has under siege. The effort will be a fraction of the cost of Virginia-class attack submarines. The study also recommends adding between 2 and 3 extra attack submarines over the 2016 force structure assessment that called for 355 ships, but the bulk of the money will go toward unmanned systems. The study, which envisions the fleet of 2045, is the same one that recommended the Navy drop to 9 carriers from the current 11 and add dozens of large and medium-sized unmanned vessels to rapidly boost capacity for less money than it would cost to invest in a comparable fleet of larger manned vessels. The Navy awarded a $43 million contract to Boeing for the first 4 Orca extra-large unmanned underwater vehicles in February 2019 and subsequently expanded the buy to 5. The Navy plans to start buying 2 per year starting in 2023, according to Congressional Research Service report from March 2020. Together, the findings of the Cape Office's study show what Esper has been saying publicly for months, that the U.S. Navy must get away from relying on large manned combatants to deliver capacity and rapidly develop and field a fleet of unmanned surface and subsurface vehicles. Yeah, this is true. Okay, this is true. There's no point in having this huge, massive military that's based on, 100, even 75 years ago. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. You don't need people inside submarines anymore. You really don't need that. Okay. You can create a very efficient military now with robotics. There's no real reason to put a soldier, put his boots on the ground or in the water for that matter, in terms of a sailor. There's no real reason for that anymore. Those days are coming to an end. A small country like Singapore figured this out years ago. Okay, Israel, as a small nation state of themselves, they figured this out years ago. It's only the United States that still sees this sort of traditional war, kinetic warfare as the only way to engage in global security. This is good. All right, let me jump to the next item on the docket. Interesting with being shadow banned. Didn't realize that. All right, this is from the drive. Russian MiG-29 and Sukhoi 24 combat jets caught in flight at Libyan base in new satellite images. New imagery has caught MiG-29 Fulcrums and Su-24 Fencers in the air at Al Jufra air base in Libya. This, along with the other details seen in the images, highlight the increasing activity at the base, since Russia sent at least 14 combat jets in total to the North African country last month to support Libyan strongman Khalifa Haftar. It also underscores that the jets themselves are now actively flying. U.S. AFRICOM, or African Command, released 2 new images of Al Jufra, which it said were taken on June 18, 2020, one of which showed an Su-24 Fencer taken off from the base. The other one showed a MiG-29 parked in front of a hardened aircraft shelter, as well as P-18 spoon rest radar. The P-18 is a long-range surveillance radar that can be used for early warning and to provide general increased situational awareness and air traffic control. Russia's sustained involvement in Libya increases the violence and delays a political solution. U.S. Marine Corps Brigadier General Bradford Gehring, the director of operations at AFRICOM, said in a press release accompanying the images, Russia continues to push for a strategic foothold on NATO's southern flank, and this is at the expense of innocent Libyan lives. On June 17th, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a Washington, D.C. based think tank, released its own analysis of activities at Al Jufra based on satellite imagery it had obtained from Planet Labs and Maxar Technologies. This includes one shot from Maxar dated June 8th, showing a MiG-29 in flight over the base. An Su-24 taxiing at the base is also seen in the imagery, as well as the arrival of additional personnel in recent weeks. Images dated May 28th also appeared to show the presence of a portion of a battery of 130 millimeter howitzers and Pantsir S-1 surface-to-air missile systems. None of these weapons seem to be in a deployed state to protect the base. However, pictures and videos that appeared on social media earlier in May reportedly showed force aligned with Haftar's Libyan National Army, including private military contractors with strong ties, if not direct links to Russia's intelligence services, fleeing northwestern Libya toward the broader Al Jufra region. So this is not uncommon. Most countries in Africa have some form of Russian hardware. And those MiG-29 fighter jets were also delivered to Syria. So one could suspect that those MiG-29s, when they made it to Syria, were debadged and then brought to Libya under the auspices of not being identified to which nation state it belongs to for obvious reasons. But when that happens, who are you going to blame? Because we don't really know who's flying them. All we know is that the planes are on the ground. Okay. We got Men of Tomorrow on the panel. Men of Tomorrow's driving, I think. So, yeah. And so MiG-29s, multi-role fighter jets, these basically cover all your total air security and creates air superiority as well. I'm not surprised. Libya had MiG-29s at one point. I think they were all bombed once NATO came in 2011. But what I will say is that someone has a vested interest in making sure that Haftar doesn't get knocked out completely. Okay. You don't throw MiG-29s and Su-24s at a situation like this and think this isn't going to cost us anything. No, there's 14 of these combat jets on the ground. So you factor in these things cost millions of bucks per plane. If you got 14 of them, they're probably talking $500 million worth of planes sitting on the ground, including, according to this image, an abandoned IL-76. Why it would be abandoned, I have no idea. Maybe it ran out of gas or something. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, dude, there's some. You think they're just going to have that kind of hardware there in this type of country that they ain't even got their stuff together? Like, come on, man.
Yeah.
Like, and we're talking just planes, not any other type of weaponry or anything else. Because them hardened aircraft shelters, they call them HAB, they can house a lot of stuff. And it's just not planes. And they can go down to as much as like 9 floors down. So you don't know, because the covering, it's a covering. You don't know what's beneath there. The only thing you can tell is the people, especially from a satellite view. You can only tell the things that are parked out there or that are taxiing from there. And this is what happens when you're not in a position to have intelligence on the ground in that area. And this shows that even if the U.S. could do something, what could you do? We're broke, we're overextended everywhere, and we just can't get control over things like we used to. So I expected something like this to be going on all over the place, not just here, but everywhere else too.
Yeah, definitely. Let me advance DE Raptor. I think he has something to say about this as well. But to your point, MOT, the U.S. is already involved in this. They have AFRICOM on the ground.
Well, yeah.
DE Raptor, can you hear us?
Yeah, I was listening to you and MOT.
Okay. You have anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, the only thing I was thinking about is what you said, is who has a vested interest in not only keeping this guy in the mix, but keeping the current government from functioning.
Yeah.
Somebody is trying to keep Libya from being reunited because they're afraid of, because the people want what they had before. They don't want this foolishness that's going on now.
Right.
So somebody has a vested interest in keeping this thing going. Who? I can only speculate. Well, I know I pretty much can get. I'm pretty much close to knowing who it is, but Um, the same people who was fighting the war in Yemen.
Okay.
That's one of the parties involved.
Mhm.
And of course, the people who took out Gaddafi, you know, and put these people in because they are making tons of money off the illegal oil trade.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's what basically is all about. Libya is not on the world market now, but it's still in the illegal oil trade. It's like Iraq.
Yep.
Most of Iraq's oil is going to the illegal oil trade. Same thing as Syria. So who's got a vested interest in that? You know,
R word.
and and what's happening is that they're trading that oil for guns, not for food, for guns, for weapons.
Well, you can always eat a bullet, can't you?
So that's my take.
Okay. All right. Let me jump to the next item on the docket, man. We're gonna fly right through these. Get to the meat and potatoes. All right. This is from Al Jazeera, Libya. Aguila Salah urges Egypt to intervene if Sirte is attacked. Head of Libya's eastern-based parliament calls on Cairo to respond militarily if GNA allied forces attack Sirte. The Speaker of Libya's eastern-based parliament has urged Egypt to intervene militarily if forces allied with the internationally recognized government of national accord attack the strategic city of Sirte. Egypt's state news agency has reported an Egyptian intervention in Libya would be legitimate if the terrorists and armed militias crossed the red line. Salah was quoted as saying by the official MENA news agency on Wednesday. The Libyan people are officially asking for Egypt to interfere with military forces if necessities of maintaining Libyan national security and Egyptian national security require this. Libya, a major oil producer, has been mired in chaos since 2011 NATO-backed uprising that toppled and killed longtime ruler Muammar Gaddafi. Since 2014, it has been split between rival factions based in the capital, Tripoli, and in the east is in a sometimes chaotic war that has drawn in opposite side, drawn in outside powers in a flood of foreign arms and mercenaries. Eastern-based forces under renegade military commander Khalifa Haftar launched an offensive in April last year to try to capture Tripoli from the GNA. Haftar forces, which are backed by the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, Russia, were forced to retreat from the western Libya in recent weeks after Turkey stepped up its support for the UN-brokered government of Prime Minister al-Sarraj. Buoyed by their recent battlefield victory, GNA-aligned forces said they would stop their advance after retaking Sirte, a city of some 125,000 people on the Mediterranean coast and inland Jaffa Air Base. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, however, warned over the weekend that any attack on Sirte or Jaffa would amount to crossing a red line. He said Egypt could intervene militarily to protect its western border with the oil-rich country. In response, GNA said it considered El-Sisi's comments a declaration of war. El-Sisi's threat prompted Italy, Germany, and the United States to push for a ceasefire, fearing an even wider war. Arab League foreign ministers also warned against a continuation of military action that alters existing front lines in Libya. Early on Wednesday, Italian Foreign Minister Luigi Di Maio visited Tripoli, where he met al-Sarraj. A statement from the GNA's head office said both men rejected the negative foreign interference in Libya. They also discussed the European Union's naval operation in the Mediterranean aimed at enforcing UN arms embargo on Libya, the statement said, without providing details. Di Maio told reporters after his return to Rome that he conveyed to al-Sarraj Italy's concern about a possible attack on Sirte, which he said could lead to a renewed fighting and more civilian casualties. So Italy is also backing the UN-based government, okay, with Turkey. And so what's happening now is that Egypt is the wild card. What will Egypt do if they do make it to Sirte? Egypt hasn't had a fight in a long time. So we don't know what their capabilities are at this point. Would it be troops on the ground? Would it be planes in the air? Naval operations? You know, this can go a few different ways. So I don't know. I mean, if you have naval operations, I mean, there's a potential that they could launch on your navy, depending on how far away they are. Sirte is at the coastline, so I mean, a few howitzers firing off into the ocean can cause some problems for Egypt's military navy. The safest bet is to do some air bombardments, right? They have enough planes. I think they have about 2,000 of them stored up. In all recent troops on the ground, that can get pretty bloody, and if it doesn't work very well, you know, then you know that could cause Sisi some issues back in the capital. So I don't know. I don't know how far Egypt wants to go with this.
This guy, the Egyptian guy, who you remember who put him in power?
Israel and U.S.
All right. Now he's going up against Turkey.
Mm-hmm.
And Turkey is the one who's shouting loud in Syria. Remember that little tussle between them and the U.S. about going into Syria?
Yep.
Now, who are they supporting?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of players in here.
Yeah,
a lot of players in here.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you have Russia with mercenaries on the ground, basically just Russian soldiers in non-uniform. You have UAE, who supply drones to Haftar. You have Egyptian mercenaries, quite possibly on the ground there. You have France, who are covering the air. You have Turkey. You have Italy. You have Greece getting in as well from a maritime perspective. And we don't know if Algeria or Tunisia are involved in this. Quite possibly they are.
They are.
Yeah.
So, the problem with the problem there is the French who started this whole thing in the first place.
Yep.
The French and NATO, and they don't have the weaponry to go in themselves, and they're not going to put boots on the ground themselves. So they gotta, I guess, support the man who was there, or the group of people who is really supporting them, buying their weapons or whatever the case might be, which is the government that they call legitimate in the GMA. So this is there are a lot of hands in this thing, and some people are fighting on both sides. There's some people who are supporting both sides, and they have an interest in keeping the Arab world in turmoil.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I think Qatar supports the UN-based government as well. So it doesn't. I mean, Libya is really messy. It's just too messy. Too many people in there. Not enough social distancing. Not enough masks and stuff being worn. Not good. Not good at all.
Right. If Libya was left to its own design, it would be a pretty strong nation. But you know, it was totally destroyed for a reason.
Yeah. All right, next item on the docket is from RT. India and China reach out to common friend Russia as deadly border conflict still raw. I'm going to read this whole thing. Days after India and China engaged in a bloody border confrontation, Russia, a common strategic partner to each, is this week playing host to the two sides. Can Moscow influence the outcome of their dispute? The Russia-India-China trilateral foreign ministers virtual meeting yesterday, hosted by Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, was the first time that India's external affairs minister and Chinese foreign minister had spoken face-to-face since the recent military confrontation. Now in the process of disengaging along the line of actual control, the de facto India-China boundary. Reportedly, India's foreign minister and China's foreign minister had an angry phone exchange just days ago over the border clashes in which 20 Indian soldiers were killed. The RIC meeting yesterday skipped over the broader dispute, focusing instead on common global issues such as United Nations reforms. Importantly, Russia once again endorsed India for a permanent seat on the United Nations Security Council, a stand opposed by China. Significantly, besides the virtual meeting of the three RIC foreign ministers, India's defense minister and his Chinese counterpart are also in Moscow. On Wednesday, they attended the Victory Day parade there, where Indian and Chinese military contingents marched together. While tensions between India and China over the border are not new, the fact that both sides have reached out to Moscow is an interesting development. Russia, which has maintained close strategic ties with both New Delhi and Beijing, had expressed alarm over the eruption of violence at the border. The Russian presidential spokesman stated that both China and India were Russia's close partners and allies, having very close and mutually beneficial relations with Russia built on mutual respect, highlighting that both were capable of dealing with the situation and suggesting that Russia did not wish to take sides and a subtle political message to Beijing. It is noteworthy to recall that during the 1962 Sino-India border war, caused by a similar escalation in border clashes, the then Soviet premier Nikita Khrushchev chided Chairman Mao Zedong. Sorry, what the fuck just happened? Nikita Khrushchev chided Chairman Mao Zedong over the confrontation. Evidently, China was enraged by the support their fellow communists gave the Indian Prime Minister Nehru and their calls for a peaceful negotiation between the two sides. Equally evident is that this squabble was an important factor that eventually resulted in the Sino-Russia split during the height of the Cold War in the 1960s and led to the subsequent China-US rapprochement. Russia's neutral position on the Sino-Indian dispute contrasts with the stance taken by the United States. In May, President Trump extended his support to New Delhi to negotiate with China, stating he was ready, willing, and able to mediate between the two Asian neighbors, an offer that was rejected by both Beijing and New Delhi. In any case, such an attempt would have been futile due to the inherent and growing mistrust in U.S.-China ties. The U.S. has also been engaged in stitching together an anti-China coalition by expanding the G7 forum to include Russia, India, South Korea, and Australia permanently. In 2014, Moscow parted ways with the group and faced with Western sanctions, sought to build closer strategic relations with Beijing. So Trump's outreach to Russia could be a cause for concern for China. India's wide-ranging strategic relationship with Russia, dating back to the Soviet era, and China's evolving quasi-alliance with Russia, has positioned Moscow as a credible and influential partner capable of influencing Sino-Indian relations, even though Russia may not have the same degree of influence over China as it did in 1962. Significantly, China is Russia's largest energy trading partner and investor. And both countries have agreed to develop bilateral trade, forecast to touch $200 billion by 2024 using the ruble and the yuan. For China, which is facing global criticism over its handling of the COVID pandemic and has found no support over the border clashes with India, backing from Russia could be crucial at this juncture. While for India, which has long relied on Russian military hardware, uninterrupted arms supplies are vital to prepare for possible contingencies with China. In fact, the Indian defense minister is expected to this week discuss the supply of Russian S-400 missile defense system that is likely to be deployed along the China-India border, and a need to expedite spares for existing Sukhoi and MiG fleets. Crucially, India will also seek to obtain an assurance from Russia that Indian supplies will not be impacted in the changing political and security environment. Thus, with both India and China dependent upon Russia, it is clear that Moscow has an important role to play in shaping the outcome of the Sino-Indian border dispute. And given Russia's strategic interest in both countries, it is expected that the border tensions could be brought under control soon. Yeah, that's it in a nutshell. I don't see anything wrong with, since I don't see anything wrong with Russia's role in any of this, it's inevitable that Russia would have to play an advisor and a mediator in all of this. The United States could never do that, especially with the fact that they soured their relations with China, and India doesn't really trust them all that much, never really did. Russia is a reliable partner, geopolitically speaking, especially for what they've done in Syria. Everyone's watching and saying, those are ambitions that we have from a national security perspective. If we were attacked, we would want somebody like Russia would come to our defense. Russia has proven that with Syria, and it actually gave them a lot of credibility on the world stage. So, all right, let me jump to the next item on the docket. All right, this is from CBSNews.com. Rhode Island moved to change state's official name due to slavery connotations. Imagine it. The state of Rhode Island is moving to change its official name, the state of Rhode Island in Providence Plantations, due to its connection to slavery. Rhode Island Governor Gina Raimondo signed an executive order on Monday to change what appears on government documents, and the state's legislature is moving forward with a bill to alter the name entirely. Many of the state's residents find it painful that a word so closely associated with slavery should appear in the official name of the state, Raimondo wrote. The pain that this association causes to some of our residents should be a concern to all Rhode Islanders, and we should do everything in our power to ensure that all communities take pride in our state. The order will shorten the name to Rhode Island in official communications from the governor's office, including executive orders and citations. It will also change the state's website. It will also remove the word plantations from all state agency websites and official correspondence, effective as soon as practicable. Rhode Island was founded on the principles of acceptance and tolerance, and our state's name and actions should reflect those values, Raimondo tweeted. Over 7,300 people have signed a petition supporting the name change. The Rhode Island state unanimously called for a statewide vote on the name change last week after the bill was introduced in part by the state's only black senator, Harold Metz. The state legislature signaled it will move forward with the referendum. Whatever the history in the term is in Rhode Island, it is unnecessary and painful reminder of our nation's racist past. Metz, who traces his lineage on his mother's side to the Speck Plantation near Charlottesville, Virginia, said in a statement. Voters will need to choose to amend the Rhode Island Constitution in November before the state's official name can be permanently changed. This isn't the first time that the state has attempted to change its name. When the state tried in 2010, 78% of the voters opposed the removal of Providence plantations. But Metz said he has renewed hope. A decade has passed since the public was asked this question. Attitudes may have changed substantially, even in the past few years. And even in the past few weeks, Metz said in a statement, whatever the meaning of the term plantations in the context of Rhode Island's history, it carries a horrific connotation when considering the tragic and racist history of our nation. So I find this interesting. So this is the second time around that they'll go for this, but who on the ground is saying, no, I like having plantation, within the name. I don't want to change it. Who are these people? I've been to Rhode Island. I used to spend a lot of time down there, a few years ago. And I can tell you right now, as small as the state is, it is full of racist people, man.
Oh my God, Rhode Island?
Yeah.
New Hampshire too. Don't.
Oh, New Hampshire. New Hampshire is like a hot spot for white supremacists and whatnot.
Oh
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I just find this to be very interesting that somebody voted against it. No, we should keep the slavery connotations there. Let's keep that there. This is good. This is good for our branding as a state.
Good PR. Good PR.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, man. When you bring this up to people, it's like there's really no rationality to do that. There's no rationality of holding on to that portion of it, none whatsoever. But if you give people a chance, they will. And it's just that most people who think like that, they don't believe in equal protection under the law. They don't.
No. It's really strange because Rhode Island has a considerable Black and Latino population down there.
Yeah.
At least Providence. Yeah, Providence and Pawtucket.
Providence, especially.
Yeah, Kill Deuce in the chat says, Mike V, those folks change everything but cut a check. Who are they cutting a check to, man? Who are they cutting a check to? The people in Rhode Island who live there now really don't have any no lineage. To my knowledge, they don't have any lineage to
No, not at all.
Any plantation.
Rhode Island, who lives there now, the Black people who live there now are mostly transplants.
Yeah.
From other places.
They came from either Massachusetts or they came from New York. Or Connecticut for that matter. And so the idea that, for them to cut a check, who are they cutting a check to? This cut the check campaign, man, is really interesting because
I can't be around those type of people, man. I can't deal with it.
Yeah, the Cape Verdeans who couldn't, when there was no more space in Boston for them, they went down to Providence and Pawtucket. So, which is not bad. Providence, Pawtucket is actually pretty good. It's only 40 minutes away from Boston, 95 north. You're good. And so, even the train, the Amtrak will take you from there to there in a matter of minutes. It's an Acela train. So, but to this point, you would think that Rhode Island is supposed to be so liberal, rainbow flags everywhere. They are still hardcore, man. It's still hardcore out there. I found out the hard way down there, man. I would never probably live there myself, but I guess if you're renting, it's fine. But I would never put my money into that place. A lot of disgusting people down there. All right, let me jump to the next item on the docket. All right, this is from the WashingtonPost.com. Slave-owning presidents become targets of protesters. Civil rights activists are toppling statues of former U.S. leaders. Having toppled statues to Confederate war heroes, the new wave of civil rights protesters who emerged after the killing of George Floyd in Minneapolis are targeting symbols of U.S. presidents who owned slaves. In Portland, Oregon, last week, demonstrators toppled a statue of George Washington, then set it on fire. And on Monday, protesters in Washington attempted to bring down a statue of Andrew Jackson in Lafayette Square. Hey, hey, ho, ho, Andrew Jackson's got to go. The protesters chanted before police thwarted them. The attempt to topple Jackson infuriated President Trump, an admirer of the nation's seventh president, who was a slave owner and demonstrator of Native Americans. The president has called Jackson a swashbuckler. His portrait
What?
His portrait hangs near his desk in the Oval Office. The institution of slavery is central to the nation's early history, particularly in Washington and the White House, which was built by slaves. In addition to Washington and Jackson, at least 10 other U.S. presidents owned slaves, including 8 who owned slaves during their presidencies. While some presidents were ambivalent about slavery, Washington, a slave owner for 56 years, left emancipation instructions for his slaves in his will. Others, like Jackson, were proud upholders of the institution. He ordered harsh, even brutal punishment for enslaved people who disobeyed orders, according to the White House Historical Association. When an enslaved woman named Betty was judged to be guilty of some improper conduct, he wrote to his overseer that she must be ruled with the cowhide and should be given 50 lashes the next time she misbehaved. Jackson hunted slaves who tried to run away, placing ads for them in newspapers and then offering a $50 reward for capture of his mulatto man slave. Must be one of the buttermilk guys from the Manosphere.
Yeah.
Jackson identified the runaway as 30 years old, 6 feet and an inch high, stout made and active, talks sensible, stoops in his walk, and has remarkable large foot, broad across the root of the toes, will pass for a free man. Interesting. The reward came with a bonus, $10 extra for every 100 lashes any person will give him, to the amount of 300. I mean, imagine that shit, man.
Wait, cowhide?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Mulatto man slave. Wonder how he became a mulatto.
Maybe he went mode 1.
Jackson didn't leave his slaves behind in Tennessee when he became president in 1829. Before moving to Washington, the White House Historical Association says Jackson conducted an inventory. The inventory recorded the names, ages, and familial relationships of 95 enslaved individuals who lived and worked at the Hermitage, his Tennessee plantation. When President-elect Jackson left for the White House, he brought some of these enslaved people with him. The 1830 census listed 14 enslaved individuals in Jackson's household, 8 women and 6 men. And many scholars suggest that his household grew during the course of his presidency. I bet it did.
How many women?
8 of
How
them.
many?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Not all men, right?
Mm-hmm. He was a real select.
Yeah. AJ, DJ AJ.
mhm. The source of that growth, more purchases of slaves, the White House Historical Association says. Historian William Steele argued that Jackson increased the number of enslaved people and decreased the number of free. Hired servants in his household over the course of his presidency to save money. So he may have viewed the purchase of additional enslaved laborers as a cost-cutting measure. It was a greater investment up front than hired labor, but it yielded a lifetime of labor for the president. In early 1832, another slave appeared in the White House. Her name was Emily. She was 8 years old. A slave at 8 years old.
What rationale?
Yeah, this sick people, man. She was purchased as a gift for Mary Emily Donaldson, Jackson's grandniece, by his nephew, Major Andrew Jackson Donaldson. The White House Historical Association says Donaldson made the purchase of the on the president's behalf. The president reimbursed him. Slave at 8 years old, man.
Mr. Trail of Tears wasn't playing no games.
Yeah. Man.
Why are these people on money? Like, it makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah.
That any person who would deny a person from that region of the United States, Tennessee, and it's like, you know, when you have like these, I'm just gonna call them conservative clowns who deny the relevance and the brutal history of it, who just say, "Oh, just forget about it." Like, man, what do you think? Like, man, like, you know, it's just unconscionable. What would you purchase an 8-year-old to do? That you already got 14 other slaves that are not doing.
Yeah.
You need an 8-year-old. Like,
I guess
I don't even want that.
I guess she's gonna get her an internship or something like that. An externship or something like that, man. I don't know.
You know, it's not like Microsoft.
Yeah. I mean, at 8 years old, man, I wasn't doing anything legitimate enough to even warrant work. I mean, what could you possibly do at 8 years old? You can barely lift the groceries up for your fucking mother when she's bringing you up the stairs, man. Like,
yeah, like
8 years old. And give him lashes too, to my mulatto slave, my man slave. Mulatto. How did he become a mulatto?
Yeah.
You're gonna get it. See, a lot of people think that, you know, light-skinned people are privileged. Not during that time. You got your ass
Oh. Got your ass beat twice by them and by the black dude. So yeah.
Man, that guy was a huge racist, man. We can
Just
have
before the Trail of Tears or anything else, just buying an 8-year-old.
yeah.
Like, just wow, that's wow. Man.
Imagine that people like him used to have children with his women slave.
Jackson or Jackson.
Then turn around, put them back in the fields.
Yeah.
And the daughters that come from that, they turn around and have sex with them too.
Jefferson or Jackson? Which one are you referring to?
Both of them.
Okay.
Because there's only one reason.
Man, these guys.
It isn't to fetch coffee, because they got grown-ups for that. It's just, man, it's bad.
Yeah. Yeah, let me jump to the next item. All right, this is from time.com. As Confederate statues come down, it's worth remembering that the Civil War wasn't only an American conflict involving slavery.
Really?
Let's try this. The Confederate monuments that are coming down across the United States have once again united a generations-old American argument. Though the idea that the war was really about the noble cause of states' rights retains its mystique for some, historians agree that the root cause of the Civil War was slavery, the worst American war in the nation's history. From the standpoint of casualties, direct costs, and indirect consequences, was fought in a vain attempt by the Confederate States to preserve that peculiar institution. Now, 155 years later, not only are statues of Confederate leaders being removed in cities from Richmond to New Orleans, Confederate battle flags are being banned at public events, and U.S. military bases named after Confederate military leaders face possible name changes. But the Civil War did not occur in a vacuum. It was the culmination of centuries of institutional racism against people of African origin. The previous 240 years had seen ongoing suppression of the rights of Black people to live free within America. Long before the Civil War, history records efforts of individual enslaved people to revolt, to escape, or both, with varying degrees of success. The Civil War was the culmination of a failed racial policy that was still born in 1619, when the first Americans were brought to Virginia. The first Africans were brought to Virginia and sold to the highest bidders. And as many Americans hope to take this moment to reassess the way the nation thinks about its past, it's worth remembering that the Civil War was not the only American war in which slavery played an important role. While the causes of the War of 1812 were more obscure than the Civil War and poorly understood outside Washington and London, the British Army fighting through southern Maryland on the path from Baltimore to Washington in 1814 crossed the plantations of slave owners. By the close of that campaign, the United States would have a destroyed White House, burned to the ground, a scorched U.S. Capitol building, and a national anthem, and a new national anthem. But the war also saw the single largest liberation of enslaved Americans between 1776 and 1865, as more than 4,000 defected to the British military and resettled in Nova Scotia and Jamaica as free people. More important, more direct, and much less publicized was the impact of Black African slavery in instigating the American Revolution. In the years leading up to the Revolution, the American South was primarily loyal to the British Crown and enjoyed a favored status compared with their neighbors north of Maryland. The Southern colonies were happy to provide raw goods The Southern colonies were happy to provide raw goods to fuel British manufacturing: cotton, lumber, indigo, along with tobacco, rice, and sugar. The fact that Southern products were produced by the labor of Black slaves was politely overlooked by the British merchants, and a triangular trade, including importation of West African slaves, became routine. Despite some concerns in the Southern colonies about British taxation without representation, that cause didn't resonate among the wealthy plantation owners as it did among the merchants and laborers in the South. So what drew the Southern colonies into the Revolution? Three attorneys who dedicated their careers to American civil rights in two separate books have provided the basis for a fresh but compelling explanation for the American South to enter the American Revolution alongside their Northern brothers. A. Leon Higginbotham Jr.'s 1978 In the Matter of Color, and 2005 Slave Nation by Alfred W. and Ruth G. Bloomerson. Those authors, whose work has more recently been cited by the New York Times 1619 Project, arrived at a single conclusion. The Southern colonies had no reason to put their lives, their families' lives, their property, and their legacy on the line until a single decision at the Court of King's bench in London on June 22nd, 1772, Somerset versus Stuart, often seen a written as Somerset versus Stuart. The decision resulted in the first legally ordered liberation of an American slave in the British courts. And the impact of that decision would ripple through the slave owning American South by the fall of 1772. The 3 years that followed the Boston Massacre of March 5th, 1770, have been referred to as the Quiet Years. By March 12, 1773, the quiet had been soundly disrupted in Virginia. The attorneys in their midst, including Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, and Patrick Henry, had been assured by Benjamin Franklin, who was then in London, that if Virginia remained a part of the British Empire, her slaves would be freed en masse. The livelihood, the land, and the way of life of the plantation owners would be brought to an abrupt end. Further, were these emancipated slaves to take up arms, the very lives of the plantation owners and their families would most assuredly be at grave risk. The only clear solution was for Virginia to separate itself from the empire. By 1775, all 13 colonies had established committees of correspondence to discuss the independence. Somerset versus Stuart was a deciding factor that began the stone rolling from atop the hill. And joining all the colonies to the single solution, the American Revolution would succeed in separating all of the British colonies between the St. Lawrence River and the Okafor Swamp from the British Empire. Therefore, depending upon how one wishes to take up the debate or count the wars, it would appear that the Civil War was not the only time the United States of America engaged in battle over preservation of slavery in the American South. Today, as the country asks what to do about the monuments to the Confederacy, some might also raise questions about the Revolutionary War. What about Mount Vernon? What about Monticello and the other plantation monuments? The restored plantations of four of our first five presidents are supported by foundations that enjoy a tax-free status, while the Southern politicians who fought for freedom from Great Britain were men of their times. Perhaps we are overdue in re-examining these moments through the lens of our own. This is interesting because they bring up a very good point. The South didn't care until, until the idea of slaves being free became a problem for them. And all of these statues coming down, people are saying, well, what's the real meaning behind this? That's because most people don't know their history. So they only see the statues in the physical form. They don't see the statues as a deeper meaning to the self-identity of white nationalists, okay? People who believe that their existence in this country is just based on the statues that are there, okay? That's where they get their pride from. These people were treasonous, the statues of these people. They were treasonous.
It was like nobody, like, would you expect a statue of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed or a statue of Osama bin Laden Jr. or a statue of, I don't know, Timothy McVeigh? Like, there would be a celebration of domestic terrorism.
Yeah.
Like, that's what we were celebrating. We were celebrating kind of in your face. This is why I just flat out told people, if those people were your ancestors, they should have never been let off the hook for what they did. They should have destroyed every single one of them.
Right.
Because, and these are the people who want to wrap themselves in a flag. The same people want to protect these monuments. Yeah. It's like, we don't know our history because you know on that show, you know that I was on, you have people who claim that the party of slavery was the same party of the people who's trying to do LGBT rights.
Right.
And I'm like, it's not the same people. It's the
Yeah.
people who make up the party and what time period. It's like, oh, such and such a Democrat. Yeah, 1860s Democrat.
Right.
Yeah, Klan March on Washington. Yeah, 1920s Democrat.
Mhm.
And it's like, no, it's the same people. Yeah, with the D behind their name, but it's the people who make up the party. And I just think that there should be lashing and political re-education for everybody. And the best way to do that is to get rid of these statues. I don't give a shit about your Southern pride. Yeah, your pride is against the federal government, the same government that provides you a whole bunch of money because you can't survive. As much as they complain about New York and California, New York and California is the reason why the South can give out those tax cuts to large corporations. I mean, dude, we got to redo all this stuff, man.
And plus, why would you want to honor the losers? Like, in what league do they do that?
Yeah, I mean, like, you know, there's like there's the NFL. Well, no, we got Canton, Ohio, but like, do they have like monuments of like the Cleveland Browns all over the United States at each stadium? Like, no. Why would they do that?
Oh man, that's a
For
good
like
point.
failed quarterbacks of like the New York Jets. Like, why would you have those monuments up all over your sport if they are known for nothing but losing? Like,
Yeah,
come on, dude. Like, this doesn't
yeah.
make any sense.
Where's the statue of Tim Tebow?
Yeah.
Oh man, that's a good point, man. I don't know, man. They want to uphold these losers and say, well, what does taking down these statues mean? What does it really gain you? It corrects history. These guys were not to be
Yes.
helped. They were treasonous, man. They were treasonous.
Listen, they fought for unequal protection under the law. That's what they fought for, all right? They turned guns on the United States military for crying out loud.
Yeah.
And these are people who we reward with names of military bases? What?
How does something like that even pass, though? How does something like that even pass? Who agreed to something like that?
Probably the same people who stopped Reconstruction.
Oh man, I guess to pacify them, you know, we'll let you have this and that, all right?
Yeah.
But people are saying, you know, well, you know, black people look for symbolic victories. Well, I would say that the Confederate South looked for symbolic victories too. They put them statues up. Them things were pretty expensive at the time.
Yeah, and they uphold their symbolic victories too.
Yeah.
I mean, you have a whole square and like things named after like Davy Crockett in like Tennessee.
Yeah. And proud of it. And proud of it.
The great thing about Davy Crockett State Park is nothing but Latinos live over there now.
Unbelievable, man.
I went to it 3 weeks ago. It's a beautiful area, but yeah, nothing but Latinos live over there now.
Did they have raccoon hats?
Yeah. But it's like this. You can't have equal protection under the law as long as you have conservatives in this country who want to conserve a country without black people.
Yeah.
You have a political party that is about excluding all people as a vibrant political party inside the country. And then you have people who claim that they're black conservatives. I'm not sure what they're conserving. If the white people are trying to conserve the original America without black people, what are the black conservatives conserving? Or what are the Latino conservatives conserving? If they don't want you in their so-called country, so what are you conserving? So it's like none of this stuff really makes any sense.
I guess they would be conserving like tacos and language, I guess. Go ahead, D Raptor.
There's something that I've always heard. I mean, even when I was in the military, the South will rise again. So these guys are, it's like a pride. We fought a war um, against the North or against you people. You know what I'm saying? It's this is not a war. Uh, uh, this is like a war against black people. You understand? And in this war against black people, everything is used. When you think about how these Southerners think, or these conservatives, or whatever they call themselves now, Dixiecrats. Well, I shouldn't use that word because people.
Today they're conservatives. I mean today they're evangelical Christians, but
Yep.
Southern Baptists.
Yeah. But they always have this belief. You know what? We're gonna have our slaves get back. You all belong to us, and we're gonna make sure that we have this in your face all the time. That's what this is all about. I mean, it's more than that, you know. But it's also to show black people. See, no matter, yes, we might have lost the fight, but look, you still have to look at us. You know what I'm saying? Well, and we're gonna rise again. And when we rise, guess what's gonna happen to you?
It destroyed the entire progress of an entire area of the United States and affects it today. That place never recovered. And if it wasn't for New York and California and their tax generation model, that place would continue to be finished.
Well,
Place
yep.
is never going to recover.
Well, and the same thing. The thing is, the same people who are saying black communities, are like third world countries. Well, there's a lot of places in the South that are like third world countries too. No running water, no clean access to septic systems and stuff like that.
West Virginia.
Hey,
Anybody?
they're
I'm telling you, it's bad, very bad.
there are countries in the so-called third world that the people in their slums live better than the people in some parts of the U.S. And I've seen that. If you go to some of the slums in Sao Paulo, the view that these people have. Well, I'm not gonna go through that. It's there for people to see. And a lot of black people came from the south, so they know.
I mean, it's very easy. If you're coming up with a specific law that targets a group of people, it should be struck down. But we have a country that still does that today.
Right.
Still doing things like that. Still allowing banks to screw over business owners regardless of credit. Just because, terrific.
Yeah, let me bring Renaissance Man in. Yes, say Renaissance Man.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Can you hear me?
You can hear you.
Hey, how's everyone going?
Good, good.
Pretty good, pretty good.
No, I was just gonna add. I heard you all talking about I believe it was MOT mentioned West Virginia, places like Kentucky, some parts of Tennessee. You can throw them in as well too. I'm sure you know from driving around the country.
Oh yeah.
Even Ohio,
Kentucky.
really.
Oh yeah, Kentucky, outside of like Louisville, Lexington, and like any place that's associated with a military installation is pretty goddamn third world. Pretty third world.
Now, what's your take on these statues coming down now? They're going after Jackson and Jefferson. What's your thoughts on that, Renaissance Man?
With those, I mean, that one's a little bit more controversial than, the Confederate ones need to come down. I mean, there's no debate in my mind. If you're talking about Jackson and Jefferson, I think that's where you kind of get into, okay, are we going to tear everyone down who has a sketchy past? And if that's the case, who are our heroes? But
now let's get wait. The sketchy past, a specific kind of past. Like this Andrew Jackson shit is like pretty. It's a foregone conclusion. Andrew Jackson is like worse than anybody in the Confederacy. Period.
No, he definitely was not a friend of. I remember watching a little bit of a documentary when he got in office. He was definitely not a friend of black people. I can tell you that right now. I was just saying with those are going to be a lot harder to get people to get on board with, because those people are at least accepted in mainstream society. I mean, for the most part, outside of the South, people aren't really, trying to defend these statues. It's really, you've got these people in the South who want to keep these up because, they were put there basically to intimidate black people, put there even well after the Civil War happened, and trying to preserve history, that whole lost cause narrative. With those, like I said, with Jackson and Jefferson, I'm sorry, in Washington, those will be a little bit more contentious to bring down.
Well,
I mean,
they should all come down. I'm serious. This is because this it. There's certain leaders in the country who contributed. Uh, they contributed to the building of the country.
Yeah.
Jefferson did. He was well, he was in that bag too, that trick bag too. But he contributed to the building of the country. Washington contributed. But you got some people who contribute anything. As a matter of fact, they try to tear down the country, destroy the country. But their statues still standing there, and people saying, we can't take that down because no. How is it that you put up a statue of a man who tried to destroy the president, try to kill the president? This, I
that's
mean,
what I'm saying.
Now, do you all have any people that you would like to see any statues erected of in place of some of these?
From the Confederates?
No. I mean, like, take the Confederate statues down, and some of these people who have sort of, been kind of looked over in history, people who are black or people who contributed to America. Is there anyone you'd like to see a statue go up of? Like someone like a Frederick Douglass or?
Sure. But here's the thing. I don't think that we should be replacing them with anybody, because I don't want there to be, we're going to get rid of these people and just put black people up. I'm like, just take these people out of here for a specific reason.
Okay, so
no,
you're not
I don't
on
want
that.
them being replaced with anybody. No, I don't want them being replaced. Because
Okay.
here's the thing. A private celebration of an individual is a private person's right. But a person being celebrated in history who specifically tried to take away my rights, oh, fuck you. No, man, we're not showing no love to that. Like, what would we think if, like, some Muslims wanted an actual memorial of, like, the blind sheikh or Khalid Sheikh Mohammed or Osama bin Laden Jr.?
Yeah. I mean, you saw the controversy that got generated.
Like, we wouldn't allow that shit.
You saw the controversy that was generated for a mosque near Ground Zero.
Yeah. So what I'm saying, it should be the same. These people, we're talking about specific people who did a litany of shit that we can see. And there's a hell of a lot of shit that we can't see.
Yeah.
But the stuff we can see is bad. And if we're ever going to have equal protection under the law, you have to stop all these people from being celebrated. And I'm like, hey, if you don't want them to go, come before people and have a nice public speech on why you think it isn't. And have your political career destroyed for doing so. That's what I want.
Yeah. It's interesting because to hear the white nationalists, complain about BET and Malcolm X Boulevard and, MLK, Boulevard. It's like, well, wait a second here. You guys put up all these statues, all these treasonous people, and you don't have anything to say about that, but you want to take down BET. You're complaining about BET.
I mean, at this point, I wouldn't have a problem if you take it down. BET
Oh,
is
I'm
not
like,
what it was.
Where do I sign up at?
Yeah, that's the thing. They don't want any vestige of anybody who even appear to be black anywhere. You understand? The only place you should be is in a slave quarters, even today. I mean, there's overwhelming proof that all the fiction that they wrote about black people is just that trash. So now it's like, what do we do? And you can't push us back in the plantation,
Mm.
you know. So guess what you got to do? You can't let somebody know. You know what? There's a black man out there who had enough knowledge, and they call him Martin Luther King, or a black man out there who has enough knowledge to say, my name is Malcolm X, or there was another black man out there who has enough willpower, thoughts, conducting himself in the way of Muhammad Ali. You know, all these people
Yeah.
should not be seen or heard. You know what? Because we object to it. Hello.
D. Raptor, here's the thing. The history made every single person that you just named possible. We wouldn't
Yep.
have needed a Malcolm X if you believed in equal protection under the law and treating people appropriately. Nor Martin Luther King, nor civil rights movement, nor trying to make Muhammad Ali serve in a war that he don't believe in. It's like all this stuff happens is because of the first action of not treating people appropriately. And I understand some people be like, well, we just lost the war. I'm like, I don't want these people being celebrated
Yeah.
for no reason. Like anywhere else.
Mm-hmm.
Now I was
You
gonna
think
say
they're putting
MOT.
up like Muammar Gaddafi statues like once he got deposed? Hell no, they ain't doing no shit like that. And it's like somehow we're supposed to be far more civilized than the rest of the country. And look at the conversation we're having over domestic terrorists who actually didn't believe in equal protection under the law. About 8-year-olds.
You know what's funny is that Germany had one leader who tried to make their republic, well, more than one, into a world-class republic, just like America, dominate the world. And after he was dead, everything with him they tried to erase from the country. Everything. You can't mention his name in any uplifting manner. Any the organizations that he built or created or was a member of are all gone. They tried to wipe it off. But here in America, it is like pride in this. I mean, it's unimaginable. The pride that
They
man.
go along with traitors. They go along with traitors.
And you can't,
Yep.
you can't deny the Holocaust either in Germany.
Oh,
Oh, no.
hell no.
Germany,
I mean, you get locked up for that, dude.
yeah,
You
but
get locked up for that shit.
yeah, but in the United States, the conservatives say, well, we want to preserve something.
Now, I was gonna say MOT. You see the whole movement with the Confederate flag and the Mississippi State flag. You got the SEC who said, "Hey, we're not playing any more championships in Mississippi till that's removed." So we'll see how long Mississippi holds out on that.
Nah, they will. I mean, because they don't care about revenue or any of the other stuff. Like, those people are there who wants to protect that history, even at the expense of going broke.
Damn.
They don't care, dude. They never have.
That's
I mean,
crazy.
there are certain cities, like in the Delta, well, with probably the exception of like racist ass Yazoo City, who don't fly that flag at all, state flag at all. But a lot of places outside of that are really not that. Who's not trying to hold on to that flag shit? Like Jackson, Philadelphia, like most of northern Mississippi. Like, yeah, man, they're all about it. And the sad thing is, you have a bunch of black conservatives down there defending the shit.
Oh man, don't get me started on them. I was on a panel with them today.
So you weren't really on a panel with conservatives. Those are rhinos.
I mean,
in the name only.
I mean, some of the stuff they were talking, I'm like, dang.
Yeah, I felt bad for you, man. I felt bad for you. I was gonna, I don't know, man.
What panel was this? Maybe I want to listen to the show.
It was fantastic panel.
Oh no.
They're talking about how we need to go for Trump this year and all
No.
this
No.
Trump's gonna be, and I'm just like, I can't even start here. Like, it's too much. It's like,
Yeah.
where do I
You know,
start?
the dude's finished. He's not gonna win.
Well,
Can't win.
I felt bad for Renaissance Man. I saw somebody throw a noose up on the panel. I said, "You gotta get this guy up out of here, man." Then he left. He mysteriously left, and I was like, "Okay."
No,
You have
it
to
just,
understand, man, that most of these people are that way because they don't know shit about history. Like me, I'm in the middle, but I know that most of the women are not on our side. And I know the conservative women are not on our side either because neither one of the women on each side is trying to get rid of feminism. Neither one of them, which is what the problem is. Neither one of them are trying to dismantle this family court system. So it's like, look, if it comes down to people basically fighting for basic freedom, there's one party or group of people who has a pretty good history of that, and that's the damn liberals. I mean, they're using it for gay people now, but before that shit, they was using it for other means and differences. So I can't turn around and just say that no, that history don't exist because I want to make the party of where slavery started, try to make it look like the party of LGBT fighting for rights. I mean, you know, I'm not that goddamn stupid, but it's like, this is why you got to have one history, and you should be a laughing stock, and your name should be removed from anywhere because of your opinion about definite history. History shouldn't even be debated like that. Like, we shouldn't have people this stupid when it comes to people in certain areas of the country that never move, but have the same points of view as they did back in the day. So
yeah.
That's the way I look at it. Yeah, well, Renaissance got off the panel, man. The buttons on the shirt were popped off. His collar was kind of leaning to the side. And, like, what happened, man? You know, why'd you go in there anyways?
No, I went on because I thought they were talking about the whole new situation with NASCAR, and it kind of moved in a different direction. And then, you know, they started talking about Trump, and I was like, well, what are y'all like? Are y'all Trump supporters? Are y'all conservatives? Y'all like, it's kind of all over the place. Like, I'm like,
man, they're conservatives who never talk about policy. Because once they start talking about policy, you'll see just how black conservative they are. Because nobody can support any of these conservative Supreme Court decisions. I can go back 40 years, and black conservatives explain Citizens United, explain Bush v. Gore. They can't do it. This is why they don't talk about policy. they can't talk about it. They don't want to make it look like that you're nothing but a Candace Owens clone. That's it. And they can't even see through Candace Owens or ABL or Officer Tatum. They can't see the fact that those people don't fight for policy. They say ridiculous shit to point towards a specific group of people in that party. Like, they can't see through it for some reason. I don't know.
No, that's why I was kind of like, wait, if you're a conservative, I'm like, you got conservative never Trumpers and like the Lincoln group who are literally running ass to try to get Trump out of office because you got establishment Republicans who want him gone. So that's why I was kind of like trying to distinguish, like, I know it's popular to say I'm a Trump supporter, but like, okay, when Trump's gone, what are you gonna do?
It's
no. You wait till he leaves and you make them die on that hill. Because a lot of people wanted to claim, I'm an independent, as soon as Bush got out of office. Right. Then it became Tea Partiers who voted for Trump. So it's like, nah, man, we're not going to let y'all motherfuckers do this shit another time. Mm-hmm. So as soon as he's out of office, and once he started to get all the investigations on him, we're going to see. But as of right now, you can't have a guy who's running the country like this, man. You can't. Even establishment Republicans are like, this motherfucker has got to go. Lifelong Republicans are saying that you got to go. So.
The only problem with Trump leaving in November would be the Republican Party would be fragmented at that point.
Oh, they're done. Oh,
yeah.
my God.
Yeah. Oh, no, that's what I want to see. Like, what are you going to have? Are you going to try to shift back to, like, you know, a Mitt Romney type of Republican Party or
nope. They not like they can't do that. They're gonna be the party of Tom Cotton and McCarthy. That's what they're gonna be, and This is why, like, the John Huntsman and Mitt Romney part of the party, like Western conservatism, I actually like. You know, it still kind of got them roots, but at least you can work with them. This is why I like Western conservatism and Northern conservatism, you know, like the Montana, Dakotas kind of thing, rather than this Southern conservatism bullshit that's about not even treating me like a human-based citizen and expect me to still behave in the same country that they in. Oh, fuck all that.
Oh, so there's a difference in. I've never been in that area of the country, Montana, yeah. That area.
Very moderate. It don't look like it, but it is.
MOT, I gotta ask you a question. Are most of those people in those areas nationalists?
Well, the nationalists, and they just don't have the interaction with black people because it's less than 1% of the people in those areas, and they're associated with military bases. So they don't have the Chicago, Atlanta, St. Louis type of experience with black people, because most black people that they meet are from the military. Right. So, since they have such a tight culture up there, yeah, I mean, you know, they don't really need no liberal-based shit because everybody pretty much is trying to conserve the area because it's so homogenous, white, I mean. So
right,
there's really no need for that up there. And even if they did have a Democrat, they're super conservative. Like you would be able to be like, damn, this person votes for nearly all the other shit. Yeah, because they're severely compromised by energy-based interests, which is what the party in the South is. You know, kind of the same thing. So you know, you have big oil in the South, and you got big oil in the North, and they run the party. They literally run the party. So.
Yeah, no, I didn't realize. I did look up. That's one thing I did learn. I will give him that. I didn't realize that the mayor of, I think they said like Bozeman or something, was this black dude from Africa, from Liberia, I believe.
Yeah, I think it's Liberia.
Yeah, now that was surprising, but I was like, hey, you know, if you're living in an area that, you know, that's that homogenous, not that many black people, you know, one black dude being in charge of anything, it's not too big of a threat, because it's like, okay, it gets too far out of line, we'll pull him out of office.
Boom.
Yeah.
So
because he's supporting what he thinks is his community. If they're oil men, then he's gonna support what brings that money in. If they're cattlemen, he's gonna support the cattlemen because that's what brings the money to his pocket.
And that's what I like about up there in that area is that everybody works. Everybody works. Like, it's just really not that much homelessness up there because you got to fucking work to stay out there. That's just the way it is. You got to work to stay out there. Unemployment is like something that they don't really give out all that much because your ass better be working. That's the actual culture up there. And if you ever went to like a motorcycle rally or any type of celebration up there, there's hundreds of thousands of people up there, no police everywhere. People chilling out everywhere. You would never see that shit in anywhere in the country, but you do see it in Montana and the Dakotas. That's what I like about it up there. I don't even feel threatened about the Republican Party up there because it's only one group of people up there, and you got to be able to fit in.
Yeah, let me knock out this article real quick. This is from AlJazeera.com. U.S. officials summon National Guard troops to protect monuments. Yeah. National Guard troops to protect the monuments.
National Guard to protect traitors to the country.
Yeah, imagine
the irony. The irony.
Mm-hmm.
Wait, so was this Trump doing this? This couldn't have been Muriel Bowser doing this in D.C.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Trump.
Hundreds of unarmed National Guard troops have been activated on standby in Washington, D.C. to assist law enforcement personnel with protecting historical monuments at the United States Capitol. Officials said on Wednesday after protesters tried to tear down a statue of Andrew Jackson in a park near the White House and threatened others in the city. Calls for removal of the monuments and statues coming on the back of enormous Black Lives Matter protests earlier this month were sparked by May 25th death of George Floyd, a black man killed in police custody in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Meanwhile, in the Midwest state of Wisconsin, Governor Tony Evers said on Wednesday he was prepared to activate the National Guard with state properties after protesters outside the Wisconsin Capitol tore down statues commemorating in abolitionists and women's rights and threw a Molotov cocktail into a government building a night of uh, into a government building during a night of violence that would also included an attack on the state senator. The violence broke out on Tuesday night after a group of 200 to 300 people protested the arrest of a black man who shouted at restaurant customers through a megaphone while carrying a baseball bat. Officers inside the Capitol used pepper spray to repel protesters who were trying to break into the historic center of state government, Madison police said. What happened in Madison last night presented a stark contrast from the peaceful protests we have seen across the state in recent weeks, including a significant damage to state property. Let me play this clip. Wow. The activation of about 400 National Guard troops in Washington, D.C. came after a request from the Interior Secretary. A National Guard statement said, they will support U.S. Park Police at key monuments to prevent any defacing of or destruction, the statement said. It said none of the troops had been moved to the streets, but that they were on standby at National Guard Armory. A U.S. official.
Mike.
Go ahead.
Yeah, that is a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act to have even National Guard troops guarding shit like that. It's a violation of the Posse Comitatus Act.
Mm-hmm. It said none of the troops. Okay.
Wow. No, go ahead. Go ahead.
It said none of the troops had been moved to the streets, but they were on standby at the National Guard Armory. A U.S. official said the activation was seen as a short-term move through the first week of July that would give the Department of Justice enough time to call on additional federal law enforcement personnel. Late on Monday, protesters tried to topple a statue of former President Andrew Jackson facing the White House. Jackson served 2 terms in the White House from 1829 to 1837, espousing a populist political style that has sometimes been compared with that of President Donald Trump. Native American activists have long criticized Jackson, a Democrat, for signing the 1830 Indian Removal Act, which led to thousands of Native Americans being driven from their lands by the U.S. government. Trump has pledged to take a hard line on anyone destroying or vandalizing historical U.S. monuments and threatened to use force on some protesters. On Tuesday night, protesters gathered in a park not far from the U.S. Capitol building and demanded a statue there celebrating the Emancipation Proclamation that freed Black Americans from slavery to be removed. The statue depicts a Black man kneeling at the feet of President Abraham Lincoln, who is offering his outstretched hand in support. The bronze memorial in Lincoln Park, designed by sculptor Thomas Ball, was erected in 1876 and built with funds solicited exclusively from freed slaves, according to the National Park Service. Black statesman Frederick Douglass spoke at the statue's dedication in 1876, but is said to have been a critic of the image it depicts. The designers of the Emancipation statue in Lincoln Park in DC didn't take into account the views of African Americans. I mean, what would you replace it with?
Can't be replaced, man. It shouldn't be.
Yeah.
The problem, like you just said, they take never in American history up to today. I mean, you know how long Black people complain about, our men are being killed? Well, not Black, so I should say Black people could say, but Black men being killed. How long been complaining about that? About blacks complaining about drugs in the community. Before that was racism. You know, how long black nobody was paying attention. Nobody was listening. Nobody takes our opinion for anything.
Nah, it'll be like I said, it'll be interesting to see if they try to put anything back. But I I hope also with all the statues coming down, I'm waiting on the discussion to come of when we're gonna do something about these textbooks that tell the history. Because you got states out here like Texas talking about black people were indentured servants, not slaves, and all that. And I'm like,
Immigrants, bro. We
yeah,
were they were immigrants.
involuntary, yeah, immigrants, like Ben Carson said. Uh, like
Yeah, trying to rewrite history, trying to rewrite the history. It's crazy.
exactly. No, so I'm just saying, like, people got to be just as much as the statues are important. My whole thing is, if you're really gonna create concrete change, you got to start with what these kids are learning in school as well, too.
Yeah.
Well, they're gonna put up this. They're gonna put up. Mostly, you're gonna see black women statues going up.
Damn.
I can tell you that. That's what's going to happen.
That's true. You had the whole Harriet Tubman on a $20 bill.
Oh, they're now talking about that, right?
Because that symbology is their thing. You know what I'm saying? Symbolism is their thing. Not practical long-term solutions. Symbolism.
Mm-hmm.
So they're gonna get what they want, as far as that's concerned.
Yeah.
I think the key, like this brother just said over here, the key I think really is about teaching these kids teaching them very young the proper type of history, so you can really see what's really going on. As far as people moving this thing around and moving it into an area where it's going to be all women or all so forth, that's going to be a big debate. But I do think we have to start from the fundamentals and the basics of teaching these kids right at young ages, and I think that's where all the stuff begins, where so much of this begins.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
No, this is really interesting because he's willing to protect Jackson and Jefferson. Okay, that's like a hard line for Trump, and probably for his base too. Like they're okay with parting way with the Confederate monuments, but Jefferson, Jackson. Why do you say no?
No, his base. I mean, I haven't talked to anyone. I've just been reading some of the message boards, and between them taking the Confederate flag out of NASCAR and people just going and taking these statues down, they may be quiet, but they're not cool with it. They're gonna be pretty mad for a little bit.
Well, I was listening to Bubba Wallace yesterday, and I saw how NASCAR came out, against this whole noose thing, and Richard Petty, a Southern, a real, he would get out there in his race car, and he'd have the General Lee's flag, sitting on top of his car, the Stars and Bars, and people really loved this guy, and he really stood up, he came out front and was against, if there was any hatred or any hating going on, he was against that, man. These guys came out front. So they're taking a different stance. NASCAR, I thought they did a great job.
No, I agree. The leadership is, and you've got people like racers who, for the most part, really with any sport, the people who are actually in the sport doing it, with them, it's all about, hey, besides the guy who quit over the Confederate flag, but most of them are, hey, race cars, we love cars. If you're a car enthusiast, join us. Same thing with other sports, but you still got some of that fan base that doesn't want to let it go.
You might have some of it, but if they're going to still be fans and still play along, they're going to have to go along with the program, and these guys have taken a stance. They when I saw Richard Petty and these guys out front walking, literally, walking in lockstep and walking in lockstep, and Richard Petty's got to be 80, 85 years old now. He's in his 80s.
He had stopped coming to the races because he was worried about COVID, and they were like, he showed up for this.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, exactly. He did. He's excellent point. This is an old guy. I mean, he's an old Southerner, so this is not like some some newbie. This is an old guy, came up in the old system, and he did back up some of the Wendell Scott, and all of them. They were all very, very friendly with them, with the black NASCAR guys back in those days who were coming up, and these guys were great wrenches and all that. Too bad we don't have Complex here to kind of expand on that a little bit more, but yeah, those guys, they I always, when I was a kid, I was kind of young, I kind of thought Petty was a racist, but that's not how some of these guys really were operating. And these guys, they took a very out front stance. So I was kind of glad to see that. I was glad to see that. I was glad to see that they are that they were in lockstep on that. So yeah, some of the fans are going to be a little bit upset, but if they're going to be in the game and they're going to play with NASCAR, they're going to have to deal with the changes that are coming down.
Oh yeah, no, NASCAR. They definitely people were kind of clowning Bubba Wallace, making it sound like he's Jussie Smollett, and I was like, well. From his side, and all I've heard is that the president of NASCAR came to his trailer, tears in his eyes.
Yeah,
hey,
he gave an interview.
Yeah. Hey, we found this. We're going to investigate. Which like I said, I believe it's Chris Broussard was saying, NASCAR looks good and all this, because
they looking real good. They definitely did a far better job than some of the other sports. I'm not going to get on to them, but they were very much out front. I mean, they're trying to build their base. And I think they've started, they're trying to get more people involved in the game, get more newbies into it. And I think they've gone somewhat a long way in with this in doing that, and Bubba's, and they want somebody like Bubba out front, good looking kid, what I'm saying, is in the game, can drive well, and they're going to be I think at a Pocono this Saturday, and they're getting ready to get live, and I think they've done themselves a lot of good. I think they've done themselves a lot of good here. So I was impressed. I was actually, for the crowd that we're talking about, and the people that we would potentially be talking about, they did an impressive job.
Yeah, no, I think another factor that kind of may have pushed them as well too is NASCAR is big on sponsors. And
for sure. I know them. I'm not going to want to have
exactly.
Right.
You don't handle this correctly, and people get upset. People start talking about boycotting these companies.
Excellent point.
Exactly. Excellent. Some of these cars may not have a logo on the front.
Excellent. It comes down to that. So yeah, they don't want savages representing their product. Regardless of how they may feel behind closed doors, they don't want to be out front looking that way. So you're dead on the money.
Now, Pocono's up in your way in New York, right?
Yeah. I was at a Pocono, some years ago. I remember when I had my 300, and I was, we got to, well, I don't want to get all into that, but I was up on the banks. Let's just put it like that. So Pocono was, it's a great motor speedway, and it's if you've ever done the track before and ever run it and see when you're coming off that high bank. And then you're coming down through the through the stands there. It's a pretty scary experience. So it's that's a slightly different deal there. But yeah, it's a great track. Track. Great place to be.
I was gonna say fan base. The other thing that I was thinking too, is the fan base a little bit different because this is Talladega, down there Alabama, that whole crowd. So you expect it, but you gotta realize you got Phoenix. You got some tracks up in, like I said, New York. In Watkins Glen up there too.
Yeah, well, Watkins Glen, that's road racing, a lot of drag racing there as well. But we're talking about the big ovals, the oval masters. You're really talking. You're really talking here. What I would say is really in this area. I would definitely say Pocono is the granddaddy of it. Is the granddaddy of it. That's a real oval track. That's for the players. That's for guys who are highly butter laden in the game.
I was gonna ask who. I'm assuming who may go to a Pocono race. I'm assuming is a little bit different than who may go to a Talladega race.
Maybe so, but you see, to me, I think NASCAR, because we black folks, we love cars. We love. We're always running around racing and running shit all day long. This shit is kind of tailor-made for us. It really is. I mean, we love cars, man. Told my man Richard Petty, I love race cars. We love cars, man. We love that shit. So, you appeal to a certain crowd here. A lot of kids would get into this. A lot of kids would. I wouldn't have any problem taking my grand out to the track, or anyone else for that matter. I think kids should look at this. So I think black people would get into this. If we had more black drivers in here, you would definitely get a lot more people getting involved. A lot more Spanish drivers and other types of drivers and stuff. A lot more people would come out. And that's who they're I think really targeting now. That's who they're looking to target. And I think it's a smart demographic to target as well.
Yeah,
So that's what. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, let me get to the next item on the docket. This is from foreignpolicy.com. The legacy of American racism at home and abroad. Domestic racism has long impacted U.S. foreign policy. It's time to open up about it. Yes. What's going on here? Oh, you gotta be kidding me. $450 a year to enable the super chats, man. Y'all gonna
No, economists isn't cheap, man.
Yeah.
No, the Economist. Yeah, I used to read that a lot of college.
No, this is foreign policy, yeah.
The Economist got a heavy foot.
Foreign policy. Okay, they're up there too. Need that student subscription or something.
Yeah, man. Let's enable the super chats, man. Yeah, we'll skip past that, man. Unbelievable. I was reading it earlier. I'm like, it was just fine. What are they doing? Paywalls, man. The paywalls. All right, this is the last item on the docket from courts. After George Floyd, Ghana's simple message to African Americans: come home. They should erect a statue like this.
That's Nkrumah, I'm assuming.
Yep.
A series of protests and events marked the life of George Floyd began in Minneapolis earlier this month. A memorial was being held 10,000 kilometers away in Ghana's capital, Accra. Attended by government representatives and a small socially distanced group of African Americans living in Ghana, the memorial was held in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement and Floyd, who died on May 25th after a white police officer knelt on his neck for nearly 9 minutes during an arrest. Ghana has long courted the descendants of enslaved Africans to return home as tourists or to permanently resettle. Leading African-American icons, including Martin Luther King Jr., Maya Angelou, Muhammad Ali, and Malcolm X, have either visited or lived in the country since its independence in 1957. With large-scale protests across the United States and Europe taking place, many hope that the organic groundswell of anger with racial injustice would be a tipping point in race relations. Ghana's government, meanwhile, is hoping to tap into the current mood of reflection and resistance to strengthen its pitch, targeting people of African descent in the diaspora. As a memorial and wreath-laying ceremony for Floyd, the Minister of Tourism, Barbara Giassi, re-echoed the government's message to African Americans to come home. We continue to open our arms and invite all of our brothers and sisters home. Ghana is your home. Africa is your home. We have our arms wide open, ready to welcome you home, she said. Please take advantage. Come home, build a life in Ghana. You have a choice, and Africa is waiting for you, she added at the event held at a center dedicated to another prominent African-American, the Pan-African sociologist, W.E.B. Du Bois, who lived his later years in Ghana and is buried at the center. Even before the memorial, Ghana's president, Nana Addo, had condemned Floyd's killing and called for justice. We stand with our kith and kin in America in these difficult and trying times, and we hope that the unfortunate tragic death of George Floyd will inspire a lasting change in how America confronts head-on the problems of hate and racism, he said in a statement. The overtures by the government have been noticed by Floyd's family, who, during his globally televised funeral in Houston, thanked Ghana for unveiling a plaque in his honor at the Du Bois Center. The family is deeply moved by the gracious act of the Ghanaian government to solidify George Floyd's legacy, an announcer said after a standing ovation. The government declared 2019 as the year of return to commemorate 400 years since the anchoring of an English ship in Jamestown, Virginia, carrying a small group of enslaved Africans. The Congressional Black Caucus, rapper Ludacris, television presenter Steve Harvey, and the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, were some of the high-profile visitors that traveled to the country last year as part of the Year of Return activities. Last November, Akufo-Addo hosted a naturalization ceremony at the presidential palace where over 100 African Americans and Afro-Caribbeans who have lived in the country for some time became citizens. The granting of citizenship gives an added force to the country's right of abode law, which was passed in 2001. The law gives anybody of African ancestry in the Americas the right to stay in Ghana indefinitely. Hoping to ride on the success in international spotlight again, the government declared 2020 as Beyond the Return to promote Ghana as a destination of trade and investment for the African diaspora. It is a move that has been set back by travel restrictions imposed as part of coronavirus pandemic control measures. However, critics have accused the government of hypocrisy as a Day of African Memorial, a visual organized by citizens in solidarity with Floyd and other victims of police brutality, was broken up by armed police and soldiers. Ernesto Yeboah, the vigil's lead organizer, was arrested and faces a hefty fine or jail time. Interesting.
You know, Africans don't care about African Americans, so.
Oh, they don't like you though?
Yeah. No, you even actually, I was watching Roland Martin the other day. You even actually had, I believe it was several African nations in the UN that were really pushing for the UN to get in and basically do an investigation on the US as far as systemic racism and police brutality goes. And they're really pushing, and unfortunately, it sounds like the U.S. got to him through a back channel and kind of made some sort of deal to get them to basically back down. But they were at least pushing for it.
Well, they did that during the Obama administration when Michael Brown was killed.
Yep, I remember his mom going to the UN.
Right. So they did that. So, obviously, Trump being in power, he's going to put a stop to that. His cabinet is going to make sure they put a stop to that. Just like Jackson and Jefferson, those are hard red lines for Trump. He's not going to back down from that. I think if they can't get to Jackson and Jefferson, they'll go after the Statue of Liberty.
Hey, just might, you never know.
Well, not so much as try to kick it down, physically, but to start putting pressure on New York. We obviously know the history of the statue. The statue was supposed to be a black woman. Where were the black feminists then?
No, very true.
Yeah, where are the black feminists then? Where's BLM for that? I would love to see BLM put some pressure on that and put a lighter fighter under Cuomo. Yeah,
I know Sean King, they said, went on Twitter today or somewhere and basically was saying some sort of statue of I guess a white Jesus. He's shooting saying this should be removed. So it's kind of going all over the place.
Well, to an extent, he's right that this is a false deity, right? This is not a person. This character should not be upheld or exalted if we're going to take down everything else. That shouldn't be left unturned either. Right. I don't know. I think that black people who keep these kind of this figurine up in their houses and places of worship, man, should really reconsider.
They should, but it's going to be a lot harder. It's going to be a lot harder to move that white Jesus than it's going to be harder to move to move that white Bobby E. Lee. That's going to be a little tougher. Now, how those statues came up, I think, is what people are really responding to. So I think you take one step at a time. Most of these Confederate statues, and the flag, that they call the Confederate flag, which is not the Confederate flag. That is not the flag of the Confederacy.
The battle flag.
that was actually the battle flag of Robert E. Lee's of Virginia Corps. That was not the flag of the Confederacy. That's a different thing. So, and I know a lot of people may not be aware of that, but that is the case. But most of those statues that we have of these Confederate generals and all that stuff came up in the 20s. Years after, long after, the Civil War, and they came up really in the face of Black civil rights, or really trying to establish white supremacy again in the South, where Blacks had come back from the Civil War. From the First World War, and wearing their uniforms and had seen a different side of life. And, we're coming back and we're starting to really express, a different feeling, a different tone from those men coming back from war. And whites were bristling against a lot of that in the South. And that's where a lot of that came from. If you look at most of these statues, to see when they went up in the 20s, 30s. We didn't see the the battle flag of Robert E. Lee, go into the I think the state flag of Alabama. That didn't happen. I don't think till 1955 or so, after Brown versus Board of Ed decision. So that's what these things really do mean. They are actually representations of not only so much of your white supremacy, but of hatred of you, of what you were doing. And that's what's so offensive about it. That's why I can understand why people are going after those monuments and these flags, because they were not about your heritage or anything else like that. It was about hatred against Black people specifically. Yeah. And that's what they represent. The Jesus thing, yeah, it does represent that as well. We all know, there've been none of the Abrahamic religions were founded by any white person. No white person ever had their hands on these religions. So Jesus, of course, was not a white man. And that was made in the image of here in the West to keep us down. So I can see that, but that's going to be a tougher fight. And especially with some of these pastors and others who so embrace that white symbol of God. That's going to be, that too is going to be a tough one. That's going to be a tough one.
Oh yeah, no, the guy in charge of Liberty is going to have a fit about that.
I'm going to stay quiet right now. Anyway, go ahead. Go ahead, Renaissance Man. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Nah, I was just gonna say the guy in charge of Liberty, he would have a fit. Falwell and his whole following.
Yeah.
Hey, you guys attacking my mom, man. I don't know about you, but I gotta defend my mom, bro. My mom go to church every day. My mom go to church every day and believe in that guy. So you better step down now.
Yeah, no, I said that'll be a tough fight, because that's not a that's a rough one. That's a rough one.
Even Black women will be fighting against you. That's tough.
Ooh, don't take that white Jesus from me. Oh,
Jesus, the notorious
Jesus.
Your lyrical thesis.
And
you just milking villain.
No, I was gonna ask Mike, and I'm assuming you've seen the video that's gone viral with the guy down in Louisiana, calling out the school board member.
Okay.
You haven't seen it?
Yeah, I've seen it. Yeah, what about it?
Okay, no. It was just another example of kind of the statues and people everywhere just really demanding that some change happened, and even in these smaller towns, may not have people going and straight up pulling it down, but you got everyone talking on this.
Yeah, I think that like I said, Jefferson and Jackson, man, is a hard red line for the Tangerine Tyrant, and he has to safeguard these things. If those two go down, then it's game over for them. They see it. They see the writing on the wall. I mean, you imagine Winston Churchill, the man of World War II for Britain, has an asterisk next to his name now. That didn't happen before, okay? The challenging of the Belgian kings and all these other monarchs inside Europe being taken down now, that didn't happen before. So this isn't just about the Confederate statues and other racist symbols in America. I mean, this is all going across Europe, from even up in Canada, man. The Canadian government has made some revisions last week. So I don't know how far they can go with this. The momentum is now. I mean, it's summertime. People are not working. They're going to be out there. They're not going to go home until they actually have to go home.
Yeah, no, that's when I wonder, like, how much momentum are you can you continue to carry this momentum? Obviously, I think as long as sports are off TV, I think it's definitely going to continue. Or I guess if you don't have, some of these states have to shut down because of COVID, because it's spiking in places like Florida.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think the Statue of Liberty will be the next big challenge for them. The Statue of Liberty will be a big challenge for them.
The Statue of Liberty, the current Statue of Liberty, the other one is hidden in the basement. Well, the other one is in the basement. The real one is in the basement, the black woman.
Yeah.
But anyway, that Statue of Liberty is up there with that guy in front of the church audience every week, every Sunday. So that's like America's second God. You know what I'm saying?
None of people start doing boycott, divestment, and sanctions on the Statue of Liberty. That can play a significant role. I mean, if they keep putting pressure on something like this, we don't know what can come from that, because somebody like Cuomo may buckle.
Well, I'm just going to say the whole Statue of Liberty, why France gave it to us, this was actually in solidarity with the anti-slavery, more from an abolitionist perspective. That's what this really was to represent. It was technically supposed to be a black woman, but literally from the standpoint of it being acceptable to the United States, they made that effigy, and it was really about freedom, and it was in solidarity with America and the joining of Africa and Afro America to the United States, which I find rather interesting, given their position on Haiti during that during the earlier period of the 19th century, and their slavery and their and their issues with black people. So I find that quite interesting. But anyway, that's what that was supposed to represent. So if we're really going to boycott that, how are you going to go against that that understanding of the statue and what it represented? It represented something that favored you as opposed to being against you in many ways. So how would that be boycotted? I would be interested to see how that would be done.
Well, it takes somebody like Dr. Umar Johnson to go on Twitter or whatever platform he's favorable on, and make that point again, because it was originally him in the conscious community who really pointed all of this stuff out in recent times. And this is going back to like 2012, 2011. So what I'm saying here is that I think that will be the final push. If they're going to start talking about removing these monuments and divesting from these things, I think that will be the final push. If they can't get that done, they'll push for Tubman to be on a $20 bill, if not the $100 bill.
Well, the move for Tubman to be on the $20 bill, that was going on certainly before this George Floyd or anything else that went on. That's been going on for a few years now. And they've actually got a mock-up drawing of what this bill would look like, and people like, it's kind of an ugly looking bill, but they do, but this is something that has been on the drawing board and been talked about now for some years, certainly preceding the events that are going on today.
In my mind, this two things happened in the last I don't know, couple of years that gave America a unique opportunity on the world stage that it didn't have. When Obama, not Obama, when this guy who is the president now came into office, this same thing, this uprising that you see in the country now, and the stay-at-home vacation that you see people having right now. If America, the leadership, but we don't have the leadership to do it. That's the problem, and it will impact the whole world. I mean, the fear that they have of China would automatically be alleviated, and China will find themselves facing a real challenge to their dominance. It will take them longer to come into their dominance than the current than the current trajectory is happening. And now that China is kind of distracted, fighting their own little war, America hooks up, I would say, with Africa, for instance, and bringing whatever technology, whether it be medical or whatever, research into the continent, and building out, whether it be hospitals, schools. You know what? You want to build a school, so no problem. We no towing the line as they used to do before. You do what we say or we kill you. None of that foolishness.
Yeah.
But they can really make a difference now. You know what I'm saying? And because I don't know, they will make a difference now. But you don't have the leadership to do it. We don't have the leadership to do it.
Yeah, no, one thing, Mike down in the chat, someone pointed out that that I thought about that was kind of surprising to me, that I thought about. No one's mentioned the war on drugs. None, and the person in the chat said none of the social justice warriors have. We're talking about symbols, but to me that would be if you actually got some monumental reform change to that would do a lot as well too, because that's one of the big, in my opinion, one of the big causes of all the police interaction with the Black community.
Yeah, but decriminalization of marijuana and those other aspects have already taken place.
Yeah, you've had decriminalization of marijuana, but can you even have? Well, I got to take it back. You've had legalization there. I'm surprised there hasn't been more of a push, even among some of your libertarians, for some of these other drugs, or at least pushing in the direction of, hey, we're not gonna police this stuff as hard as we've been doing, because this is part of the reasons that there's been this over policing of the Black community, is people running after drugs, and it's been largely a failure.
Yeah, and this war on drugs was not really more of a police action. This initially came down from President Nixon, who wanted to have this war on drugs, and even John Ehrlichman, who was a executive staff member of his White House, said that they targeted Black people, for drugs, and it was done more from a political perspective, to keep you down. So these were policies that came about that were ultimately filtered down to the police, but this was not initially a police action. This was political, and yes, I hate to have to say it's social and cultural policy that was laid down on us to take us out, and that was the police were the arm in which to lock you up. But this came down from a presidential edict. This came down literally from the top. So this, I wouldn't call it so much a police thing. This was really a policy that was established against us, like welfare, like like your health care bill. This was a crime bill, like what Clinton backed up on you as well, in his omnibus crime bill, and incarcerated you more, which was an extension, in my view, of the war on drugs as well. So these are policies. That's what I'd like to say about that. So so from the standpoint of just on police, I can't put that on police per se. They were just carrying out orders from the top.
Oh no. I get the orders. Only thing I was saying with police was regards to where they go and actually administer these policies. You don't, like Mike said, go to Harvard and MIT and do a big drug sweep. But
No. Those policies are not designed for that. Those policies are designed for Black neighborhoods, for your areas, for the hood, if you will. When you hear I was having some conversation with someone on another individual's channel. They were, what about the hood? I mean, this person was screaming like a shine, but did not understand, quite frankly, that these are policies that are taken against you. And you got to understand that they're policies that are designed to adversely affect your community, not theirs per se. So no, they're not going to be in Harvard. They're not going to be up around Yale. They're not going to be, around the Cambridge part of Cambridge section of Massachusetts, or in the on the upper crust part of New Haven, Connecticut, where Yale is. The other side of town, they're going to be there, where the downtrodden Negroes are. That's where they're going to be, but they're not going to be, where the wealthy live, and where the intelligentsia resides. That's not designed for them. It's just these programs are designed for you and you specifically, and there's nothing good about it.
Hey, where's Stanford University at?
Palo Alto, I believe.
All right. Between Stanford and I forgot the think tank that's out there now. But it's foreign policy, the U.S. foreign policy.
I can't even hear him.
Not Hoover Institution. Are you saying?
Stanford, there's a think tank in California that deals with U.S. foreign policy. You
mean the Rand Institute?
Rand Corporation.
Yeah.
Okay.
Between Rand Corporation and Stanford University were responsible for majority, if not, most of these two programs, gangs and drugs, in the Black community.
Yeah. Along with Alec, right?
Yep.
Alec, yep.
Yeah. So no, like I said, it'd just be interesting, like I said, the statues and the monuments and symbols, they're important, but just hope people get some more substantive discussions going on as well too.
Well, there has been, when I was at the protest over the weekend, they were talking about political prisoners. Only problem is they only talk about Assata. Okay, there's other political prisoners that are still in the dungeons of the United States right now.
Got some old Panthers if some of them haven't died yet.
Yeah, well, yeah, they're political prisoners. That's what I'm referring to. And so, we'll see what Trump does. He's been letting out other people, 2,000 people so far since he's come into office. We'll see what he does. If he lets them out, that could be a game changer in terms of slowing down BLM, because that's really this. They've been really pushing this, political prisoner thing, even though they can't name any. They don't seem to name anyone. They only seem to know Assata, and that's it.
But Trump can't release those political prisoners because they're in the hands of the police, and the police use those people to say, well, you know what? Well, this one killed a policeman, this one did this one did that. And the police departments in every state where you have a majority of the political prisoners are the ones who normally voice their objections and cause these people not to be released every time the governors of those states think about releasing them.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with a lot of that. I think you have your political prisoners, but what I think what Trump is really trying to push is he's trying to really go towards those who have done nonviolent crimes and say, hey, black folks, this is a little bone thrown to you. So if you got caught up in some of this drug stuff and some of this other stuff, we're gonna cut you loose early, get you on out of there, and not not leave you languishing in these prisons because these were nonviolent crimes. But meanwhile, there have been many whites who were in there. I happen to know some Albanian gangsters who live in my area who were called the Sixth Family. Some of them are going to be getting out of jail early because they were not convicted on violent crimes or anything else like that. They were a threat to the mob, so the Italian mafia, so they're letting them go now because they didn't do anything violent. They got them on some other stuff, but they got to start to let these guys go. And a lot of other people are coming out on that as well. So that's not so much even taking care of us in a big way. It's taking care of a lot of them too. So I don't think it's that big of a move towards us. But hey, every little bit helps the way I look at it. If you can get a lot of brothers out who are been thrown in prison as cannon fodder by the far right, by the right wing, by the left, by the far left, progressive wing as well. We have many people in prison, so all of them have played in our jailing and massive incarceration, and a lot of the leftists wanted you out for economic reasons, and that's why they're literally still fighting you now as you are coming out of prison, and they're trying for you not to get into some of these marijuana and dispensaries where you can have the opportunity to kind of make some money there. And they could say federal laws are against you and all this, but yet they're making these ridiculous costs to try to get involved. So these people are supposed to be down with you, but they're making sure you don't get into this business. So you're not going to get me caught up in a lot of some of this left wing stuff either, because they're these liberals are not really your friends either, and we've seen that as well. So I'm not buying a lot of stuff that's out here. But right now, if the president is going to cut some people loose and he's going to start letting some people who have not had violent crimes loose, I think that's good as far as political prisoners that we have here in this country, and letting them go, whoever these people can name. I don't believe that they're going to be they're not going to be ready to let a lot of them go, because especially what's going on right now in the streets and what's happening here, I don't think they want to release certain voices, and that too would be the acid test. But from the standpoint of just straight out bald criminality that they've arrested a lot of black people on for you having a joint in your pocket, or having a tenth of an ounce or a quarter on you or something else like that. And now you're doing all this time. He's saying he's going to give you a break. So, let's see what's happening. Some people already been released. I suspect he may amp this up a little bit more before November comes, because right now the numbers are not looking good for him. He's not looking good in the numbers. He's got to have some ways of getting people to come out to support him. And we're not talking about the far right wing, but now we're talking about he's going to have to cut into some of the progressive, some of the middle of the road, and into the black community. He's going to have to do some of that. So maybe this is a game he'll play. Will have some effect. I think it might, but I don't know if it'll save him. But it might. So we'll see. Political prisoners, I don't think he's going to be letting many of them go.
Yeah. How is the protest, Mike?
Oh man,
Didn't throw any Molotov cocktails, I'm assuming.
they want to defund the police while still being escorted by the police. Make it make sense.
Wait, now when you say defund, are you talking about the people who are literally saying get rid of police altogether? Because you do have that element.
No, the people who are saying get rid of the police are the people who are just misusing the term. So the defund, they wanted to defund Cambridge Police for $4.1 million, okay, which is a very small lump sum for a large police force like Cambridge Police, because they're very sophisticated in what they do. And the idea behind the protest is what that, they'll go, from Harvard all the way down to Central Square, down to the police station headquarters for Cambridge Police. And so out of all those thousands of people, man, there was only like, I'm telling you, I can count on both of my hands how many brothers were out there.
Oh, wow.
I was surprised at that. Okay. And
no, go ahead.
They had no interest in engaging brothers on how they felt about police brutality or anything like that. Nothing about systematic injustices, nothing. And it was women at the forefront. I got some pictures. I'm not going to post them though.
Did you get to talk to many people? Like, hey, is this something you just kind of jumped on because it's hot, or
they're not interested in talking with brothers?
Oh, really? So you couldn't just have a casual conversation, like try to get some background on them?
Nope. They're not interested in talking with brothers. This is about, TRANS Lives Matter and George Floyd in rainbow colors. Okay. That's the sort of movement they had. There was a little bit of twerking going on up in there. A lot of dancing and stuff, a lot of singing and stuff like that, and too much chanting. And it was hot, man. It was fucking 90 degrees. I don't know what they were thinking. There was no social distancing. So you couldn't social distance, although people had masks. They were giving out masks. So they were well organized in that capacity, giving out water, giving out Gatorades, Powerades, masks, hand sanitizers. They were well organized with that. They had marshals on each side of the street. If you were on the sidewalk, they moved you off of that. You're not allowed to be on the sidewalk. Bikes and stuff like that. You couldn't be on your bike. You had to walk your bike. And so they were organized in that capacity. Okay, they had walkie-talkies and stuff like that, communicating with other people up front and in the back, but they were escorted by police. So what I'm saying here is the overall aspect is that they have a playbook. Okay, BLM has a playbook that they go by, and they stick to that. And so what I find is that Black men are only, the maximum value of Black men is at his point of death, not at the point of presence. So if you can speak, that's not what they're looking for. They don't want to hear. They want to hear from you. So there's a lot of misandry within the movement itself, even though they're holding up George Floyd's face on a placard. They're not really interested in hearing Black men speak unless you're gonna wave their banner, and that's not the way Black men protest. Black men protest differently than what that movement stands for.
And I found it kind of interesting. Mike makes it; he's dead on it. I found it also rather interesting that some of the Black men early on in the BLM movement, some who were actually killed, I didn't see a huge, massive, crazy outcrying from BLM about the deaths of these men. These people were questioning their deaths and so forth, but it seemed to kind of die down kind of fast. And then the women and then the other ones kind of stepped up and that was it. I didn't hear much about, what was that brother a couple of brothers got killed. And I'm forgetting their names, so excuse me, but there was not a lot of what I considered considerable outcry about this inside of BLM even itself. So I started to look at it a little bit sideways then, but I take a look at the amount of money that BLM gets in. I think they've been funded somewhere to the point of over $50 million, $60 million or something. They have a lot of money.
Somebody's printing these T-shirts. Somebody's printing these placards. These big, massive banners that they have on the street. Somebody's paying for that. That's the stuff. And I don't know how they're getting it done. I think a lot of that stuff is already pre-produced. And they just go out and just attach certain items to it, and then they're good.
But Mike, if you got 50 to 60 million, and I would say even more than that, you can do a lot of shit. You can print up a lot of stuff.
Well, it depends on it depends on how the money is being spent. Big, first class flights and stuff across the United States and giving out speeches and megaphones and stuff like that. That, 50 plus million sounds like a lot, but that stuff can get eaten up pretty quickly if it's not used correctly.
It can get eaten up quickly, but I'm suspecting that who's also handling the money may not be some chicken and biscuit eater running around doing that left, right, and center. I'm suspecting if the smart money is getting behind this, which I suspect that it is, the smart money, it's going to be handled in certain kind of ways that it's going to push forward. It's going to push forth the agenda that it wants to put forth. Let's just say that.
Yeah, it's leaderless as well. You don't know who to talk to. There's no leadership there. And that's the way they prefer it. They don't engage people. So there's no meetings there's no way that the Black Manosphere is going to say, I want to have a meeting with BLM. They're not even going to acknowledge you. They're not even going to acknowledge you.
Well, I think if you had a few million followers and people, if this thing was arranged in a certain type of way and we were talking to political candidates and doing some of the things that I would have thought that we could have got involved with, but that's neither here nor there. I'm saying as far as us getting involved in some of the mainstream stuff that really is moving and shaking this culture right now that a lot of people recognize from a numbers perspective. I think that they would.
No, they're not. No, they're not. They're not. That's the playbook. That's the playbook. We've gone over this.
You say that they're not, but I don't know.
I've been on the ground. Nagone, I've been on the ground with them for a while, since last year, and I've spoken with people from the movement. They are not interested in talking with anybody on the ground, especially for Black men. They're not interested in that. So their perspective is they got a playbook and they're going to keep going. They strategize behind the scenes. I'm not sure what tool they're using to strategize with, but they have a tool that they use. They know how to organize really quickly. I saw the numbers went from like 500 within an hour to like 3,500 people to organize for that day. I'm blown away by that. I don't know how they're able to do something like this and have all of these duffel bags and backpacks full of Gatorade and stuff like that. Just massive organization at scale. And
well, we can see that's where a lot of their money's going. I'm not on the ground with BLM, right? My daughter, I'll admit it now, my daughter was out there with the protests, in the city, and I wasn't very happy about it. Thinking, just knowing that you're getting down with it with NYPD. But she was out there with we said males. She was out there with her boyfriend, and they're out there. She's 25, and and she's kind of a tall sister, and they were out there, kind of doing their thing, which I was not crazy about, and so I will admit that right now. But they were out there, I'm not on the ground with the BLM folks. So I can't speak to that. What you say, you may be right, but I always look at things. People respond to numbers. People respond to either money or they respond to numbers. That's just kind of human nature in many respects. So
because it's leaderless, Nagone, that's what I'm saying. It's leaderless. There's nobody for you to talk to.
Well, so you're saying it's like calling up AT&T in some respects.
Yeah, you're gonna get put on hold, man. There's nobody to talk to. Wait. Were there when you try to engage them in discussion, they're not willing to have that conversation with you. Not because you're not organized yourself, but because that's the playbook. Don't engage non-BLM members. Don't engage them. Keep going. And whatever they say to you, one ear and out the other. And you can't. Some of the brothers, man, were like, yeah, let's go down there. Let's go rough them up. I'm sorry, but they're surrounded by police, man. Defund police, and they're surrounded by police. You go ahead and put your hands on them if you want to, man. You're gonna be the laughingstock, man.
I was gonna say that, and if you said that there's some rainbow flags in there, you could be opening yourself up for some hate crime or something like that. Not the smartest move.
Yeah, that's not a good move, man. Plus, even if you took away the police, you're just outnumbered. You're just outnumbered. They would gorge you to death with their stilettos and whatever else kind of items that they have, little gadgets and stuff that they have, man. A lot of them had backpacks. You don't know what's in their backpacks, man.
I was
Well,
going to ask.
I spoke to my daughter. They were out there. She said that people are not walking around any kind of weaponry or anything. So she said that's why the police are not really trying to come at us right now. The heat is on, so they weren't really trying to come at us with any weapons. I was just, now she's been out there in a limited way, and I was very upset about being out there without, she'd mask. Everybody had their gear on as far as protection, but yeah, there was no social distancing, and it doesn't seem to be affecting the younger people as much as it's hitting people in my age group, the COVID and so forth. So they're out there rolling hard, with their cousin and all that. They're out there kind of thick. They're out there deep. But like I said, I don't know a whole lot about the ground. I'm just going on, with information my daughter has given me back, and it doesn't seem to be as crazy and as haphazard. It is organized, and BLM is out there for sure. So Mike is right about that. I don't know about who they would talk to or not. As I said, I'm not. I'm not really, deep into it like that. But I certainly know that they're not crazy about Afro-American men there. And I was on a network program just the other day where two women were speaking kind of negatively about black men, but yet they were talking about BLM as well, which I was totally, I can't say surprised, but I was disappointed in what I heard. So, the movement is definitely not looking out for black heterosexual men. It doesn't seem to be favorable to us. And and black men, I don't think protest this like that this way, even though her boyfriend's there and he's a brother, but he's kind of a tall, lean dude as well. He's not big and swole, which I think would probably cause him maybe more damage. Maybe people would hunt him more if he was like that. I think they would be afraid of it. But there, there's not a huge, heavy black male presence. Even in the New York situation, I mean, black men are there, but it's not a huge, giant presence. It's not a massive one. That is true. And they are they're trying to, in some respects, use that against black men are not a part of this. We're out front, so they are. So I just want to say they are trying to use that against you.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. I think Mike got someone to hang out in the back. But I was gonna ask you, do you truly believe there is no leadership, or you just think they kind of keep it under wraps?
No, it's no leadership. It's considered to be a leaderless movement. It's considered to be leaderless.
I struggle with, like you said, then if it's truly leaderless, like how do you bring all this to scale of, okay, we're going to be here, everyone bring backpacks,
They use social media. They use Facebook to its fullest potential. There's all sorts of granularization in Facebook that they use and Twitter that they use. Somebody is helping them a lot with this. I'm a tech guy and I don't even understand how they're doing this.
Yeah, but their social media game is on fleek.
Yeah,
their social media game is on fleek.
I understand it, but they have a whole entire operation to do something like that. It requires a lot of skill and it requires a lot of labor, and so somebody's paying for that. Somebody's paying for it, and so to answer your question, Renaissance, the lack of leadership, from what I understand from the people that I've spoken to last year and over the weekend, there's nobody you can find. You can't find anybody. You can't communicate with anybody. And I'm a part of an organized group, very well organized group, and they can't get in touch with anybody there. And so,
and the co-founders aren't involved like that on the ground.
No, these are people are local.
Okay.
These people are local. So it's chapter like, it's kind of chapter like, and
I'm assuming no national structure then either.
Yeah.
Like each chapter kind of does its own thing.
Yeah, it's kind of franchise, like a store. It's kind of franchise, and people just do their own thing. They wear the branding and everything else, but there's a playbook that they go by, and then they kind of just go with that.
Well, they don't want one titular head, because if they were able to grab that titular head, whoever that might be, They figure that they can hit that head, and then that might, disrupt things. So they want to be rather amorphous in that regard. You can't really define their shape. As far, we know they're funded, we know they can get out there, but they don't have one person they can hit, which, you're looking from a standpoint of organizational combat, from a social perspective. That's brilliant. That's how actually you would like to have your game set up. Not that I'm, going crazy about whatever that movement is, because I think that it doesn't incorporate us at the level that it should, or those that were in there who got killed and didn't say much about it. But yet, how they are set up and being, not having one person that you can put your finger on and nail, and let's say an org structure that you can grab easily makes it, I think, effective.
I think that's different than how Black men operate, right? Black male organizations always have some figurehead. There's always some form, like I said, it's structured, and men respond to structure. In these movements, the lack of structure makes it difficult to really engage. And even just being there, like, I don't have a whole lot of anxiety, but when I was there, I felt like I was being oppressed, man. How come, where are all these people going? And how come guys like me, I'm not being engaged? And no one's asking me about what my experience is. This is all these people on these megaphones talking as if they're speaking for me. And I'm sitting right here and I'm like, no one asked me any questions, man.
But Mike,
Are you a part of this thing on a regular and consistent basis? Anyway, go ahead, DE. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
there is a structure, but it's only that most of the people involved there, I said 99.99% of the people don't know the structure. They might know somebody who they get their marching orders from, but that's the only thing they know. I don't know if you remember what happened in the Arab Spring. Something similar to this happened during the Arab Spring. This is how the Arab Spring was set up.
Well, I want to bring up a quick point here. Some of you guys may not want to, chat with me on this, but there's a Black guerrilla family that exists in the prison system, and it's very racial political movement there, which is really about, kind of trying to uplift brothers, if you will, and protect brothers in prison against other groups. But, they read and they do a lot of different things. You see some of these jailhouse scholars come out, and a lot of them are BGF, not BGS, BGF. All right. And they have been very successful in being powerful in the sector. I mean, you have your you might have your Aryan brotherhood and so forth, and you might have your Mexican mafia, but one of the most powerful exists are the Black guerrilla family, and they do move from a racial perspective, but they don't have an organized leadership there from a standpoint of one leader. They have a series of groups that work, so you can't hit one and then knock out the other. And they've gotten very sophisticated, and they actually have now lecturers and teachers coming in there and all kind of stuff, and as well as they're engaged in other things, and they seem to operate at an exceedingly sophisticated level. And some of the other groups that are in the prison system say these guys are highly sophisticated. They're one of the most sophisticated groups we've ever seen. And that's existing in the system right now, which also has its movements on the street, but it's a group of men, and they don't have a one leader who you can sit down and say, this is what it is, this is who this group is, and how do we stop them? It's been very difficult, and they've been very sophisticated, and they've actually got a lot of people in the system itself as guards and so forth like that who are kind of members who work with them, and it's very interesting. I just bring that up to say that they too are operating like that. Now, whether or not that's because of the system that they have to exist in and deal with might shape that to make it operate at that type of level, but we do see something like that, and it's unfortunate that it's in the prison system and it's not so much out here in the streets. But But we can operate like that, I think, depending on the circumstances or the system you're underneath. I'll just put that out there. I don't know what anyone has to say to that.
No matter what kind of organization you have, is always a leader or a committee.
Yes.
It is always, you might not see them,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
most of the people who work around them might not see them. It's not like a corporation where you know the CEO. You understand?
Yeah.
And you know his board of
There's not
directors.
one person you can put your finger on, is all I'm saying.
Right.
But
Or we know the
like
three.
it's like a spy organization, like the CIA. You know the head of the CIA, but you don't know many of the people who work under him.
The underbosses.
You know, the guy underneath him or the guy underneath him, the second in command, you might not even heard his name, but he commands the whole of the Middle East or the whole of Asia or something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but to be a part of BLM, there's a sort of mindset and character development that goes with it. Not everybody can be a part of it. From my understanding, from what I'm seeing, you have to learn how to sing, you have to learn how to dance, snap your fingers, and it's something that typical everyday Black men don't partake in. They just don't operate that way. Black men are very educated. Black men are very stoic. They don't move like that. They don't move like that at all. That's not how they operate. Even Tariq Nasheed and Dr. Umar Johnson, I've been following them for years, even in person. You know, I've met them several times. They don't move their events like that. It's just not like that. Men don't get down like that. At least Black men don't get down like that. And the men that I do see in these movements, their battle flag is a little bit different. So point that I'm making here is there's a particular sort of characterization that goes with being a part of BLM that I think is very interesting. But let's go to Cyberline. He has his hand raised.
Good evening, gentlemen. Can you hear me?
Put some volume on your mic, brother.
Can you guys hear me now? Is that better?
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, good man. What's up, bro?
Oh, hey, good evening, gentlemen. Hope all has been well. So it's interesting. I've been listening and kind of watching from the skies out in the galaxy, so to speak, going here, going there.
Mhm.
And I wanted to comment on something Mike had mentioned, which is on the ground and how they operate is I've actually been watching them very closely for a long time. And it's sort of how they operate in a satellite structure where they operate by a means of kind of corner posts, just like from a technical perspective, how a mesh network utilizes access points
Mhm.
at various different locations. And all the access points obviously don't control any one segment, but they all report back to obviously, a core router. That core router can be anywhere, but you would never disclose the location of how you would have your core router, or that core router would be, extremely secure, but it is sending out and controlling all of those APs or access points, which eventually form and extend the network as a whole. And so it's interesting listening to what Mike has said and kind of what I heard DE mention. And me watching them, I have exactly the same solid sediments as Mike and some of you all have mentioned. And watching them, they appear not to have a rigid structure like a typical organization. They're very flexible, very fluid. But again, having been watching them for quite some time, I have identified that they do operate sort of like a mesh network with access points spread out, and they're able to move. They're very agile in
Yep.
terms of how they move.
Yep.
And to something that Gone said, you know, in terms of kind of confronting an organization like that. I think it's possible. Actually, I know it's possible to confront this organization with the points that you gentlemen bring up. However, the approach has to be one of interruption, with, you know, an organization that moves as, you know, agile as they do. Their greatest assets are numbers of people, and their greatest disguise is the fact that to the average onlooker, they don't appear again to have a rigid structure. So like Mike said, if you were to go and try to demand a meeting with them at one place or another place, or let's just say they're in many cities, a lot of APs, a lot of networks, but one entire network, one movement, one game plan, one playbook, it's difficult because they can say, oh, well, we don't have anybody that represents us here, which they do. So the same way that you would attack a network, you know, so to speak, where if you couldn't pinpoint a source or entry point, you find one point and you cause interference, or you run interference at that one point, which in this case, you know, anyone who truly wants to interrupt or cause them to be accountable at this time, you know, with a lot of the things that we have going on, you'll literally have to get out and stand up against them and cause people to basically say, look, there's opposition to this Black Lives Matter. This is what they're saying. And you'll have to run that opposition, not just in one place, but you'll have to emulate the same exact methodology that they use to stay very agile, which means you have to stand up a podium or a platform, you know, and say, you know what, we don't see Black men being represented. We don't see certain conversations being represented, but you're waving the banners and the flags bearing, you know,
They're gonna
Black
usher you
men.
right. They're gonna usher you right up out of there, bro.
Well,
Already tried it. They're gonna usher you right up out of there. You're gonna
this
be
is,
the
but
bad
this is,
guy, and there are people there that are spotters.
well, I didn't say, well, I didn't, well, let me, and I apologize. I didn't mean go to a Black Lives rally and disrupt what they're doing. When I mean interference, and to clarify, what I'm saying is they can't usher you out in a city where you have your own rally. And it's not necessarily a counter protest, because, you know, these days everyone's getting a lot of things confused. It's not a counter protest if people, like you said, are truly interested in saying, you know what, we're noticing, like on the ground, like you're there, you see they're not interested in having conversations or talking about or talking to Black men, but they're waving your banner, they're waving our flags, our image. If you know, if I were to come up to Boston and say, you know what, guys, let's organize our own rally, and it's not going to be a counter protest, but we're going to start putting the message out here with our megaphones, with our platform, and say, you know, we're not having these conversations. And we wouldn't come out and just, you know, throw railing accusations at them, because you would run people off. But strategically, what you would do is to say, well, you know, let's get the awareness out that you guys aren't really speaking to a lot of the African American men in the community. And we don't really see the connection being drawn, other than you guys marching, other than a few Black folks that are just following along with it. But there's nobody who truly represents, or there's nobody who truly can come from their side out in public to show the presence of accountability that we all see that truly doesn't exist. And when you have that, now people are going to begin to question and say, well, wait a minute, you know, because they'll probably have a token African-American male come out flanked by, you know, maybe a, like you say, a two-guy person.
John Boyega, they got Hollywood behind them, man. This isn't, what I'm saying to you, and I'm saying to everyone else, the ideas that you all are maybe putting out there, they sound good in theory, but they are like a freight train at this point. And trying to get in front of them and try to confront them and challenge them on some of their views, that's not going to work. It's not going to work. You gotta come up with your own organization and really go straight to the top, to Washington, and really address those issues, or go to the top of the state and address those issues. Trying to get in front of BLM at this point, you're just going to get run over.
Well, yeah, exactly. they got too much momentum right now.
Yeah. Too big and too well financed.
And they're too big.
But you don't think that would be
tentacles that reach in a lot of different areas.
You don't think that would be slowing the wheels down? I'm not saying get in front, but
no, because it's not.
At this point, it's a hashtag in corporate America. It's around the world. They got Plaza's name. They've got
global. BLM is global.
So much momentum right now.
Yeah, it's the equivalent of like the momentum that they have. You don't want to get in front of something like that. You just don't want to. Even the far right, right? The white nationalists and stuff like that, trying to confront them, even though they have guns, what they're trying to do is not effective. And they have a lot more organization themselves than even Black men do on the ground. And so what I'm saying here is, I hear what you're trying to say, because I've heard this argument before, even over the weekend. It's not feasible to go after BLM. It's more feasible to chart a 10-point agenda and take that to your state, your federal government, so on and so forth, to get those get that agenda met, get the needs of that agenda met, rather than to
I have a question.
No, you're right, Mike.
So I have a question, because I hear you, but I have a little pushback against that, not in major disagreement, but so I'm just kind of listening to the cadence, right, that we're having. And if the cadence is, the current tune is, if they're not interested in hearing a lot of the voices of, African-American males that they claim to represent, if it's true that they're not interested in hearing those voices, and this movement obviously being as strong as it is, and many different facets, when I'm looking at these Black Lives Matter movements, over time and even up to this point, those are Black folks that are out there in those crowds who have bought into that message. And so the question I have to ask then, based on the alternative that you gentlemen are providing, is how effective do you think the alternative that you're suggesting would be if the number of Black men who are on board the train, so to speak, and the train is moving? How effective do you think that alternative would be if their number is greater than the number that would potentially go to state, local government, the legislative branch, to put a 10-point agenda on the table? And can we point, is there something right at this moment that we can point to that, would reflect some semblance of possible viability with your alternative? I'm curious.
So you're asking me what's the viability of the alternative?
Well, I mean, as it stands right now, I'm not saying it's a bad alternative. I'm all for it. But again, if we're going, I'm being devil's advocate. If we're going to say that the Black Lives Matter movement is big, scary, powerful, and hairy, If it's a gorilla now on steroids, okay, point taken. You can't get in front of them and you can't slow the wheels down. But we say, well, let's go the legislative route. Do we have any examples where this alternative approach of going legislatively with an agenda to kind of short circuit? I mean, that's because that's the route. That's what they're saying.
This hasn't been done in our lifetime. At least the ones on this panel, we're not old enough to have seen something like that ever been done under the conditions that we're on right now.
Yeah, I was going to say technology has kind of changed the game with organizing, and I was going to reinforce what you said, Mike. People on the right can't even slow this down right now. You got guys saying, like the King's announcer saying all lives matter and getting fired.
The civil rights movement. Let me say the civil rights.
So is it hope? So it's hopeless then, right?
No, it's not hopeless. It's not hopeless. I think the point of focus is out of focus. It shouldn't be about countering what they're doing or challenging what they're doing. It should be about building up male organization to address the issues that impact Black males and not worry so much about what BLM is doing. BLM is an MRAP at this point. And all Black men are doing is they're holding Kalashnikovs trying to fire at it. And it's impenetrable for the time being, unless you find a weak spot, in that vehicle. I think at some point, they'll start to run out of steam because of the seasonal changes, especially when it comes to wintertime. That's going to come to a stop. People won't be out in the streets like that. But for right now, you just have to sit and wait.
I would like to say one thing. We did see tremendous organization happen. I'm old enough to see this, the civil rights movement, which was organized at a super sophisticated level. And it had everything from the street man to your top-notch civil rights attorneys and your politicians inside of the system that were working together. It was an unbelievable confluence, and it changed the direction of this country in many ways. So we have seen
a pandemic though.
But no. As far as a pandemic,
did it happen during a financial crisis?
And these other things that have come about? No, but I think at the end of the day, the organization, regardless of those circumstances, which are significant, still, if you had a very well organized machine like that, you could function. You could function certainly within a pandemic, or which a pandemic could maybe even help you, and a financial crisis could potentially even give you that much even more juice to push the system more, because things tend to move. When doors ultimately start opening up, when you start seeing a lot of social unrest and action that really starts to shake the system a little bit, you start to see doors start to open. That's what we're looking at here. That's what we saw in the 60s. So there's a lot of parallel, in fact. But the reality is, if we're looking strictly for an organization strictly for Black men, and addressed strictly for Black male issues, as far as the organization is concerned, we do have Black male organizations. We certainly do have them. Could you really begin to pull these organizations together and roll in lockstep? That's a whole other question. Regardless of a pandemic or financial crisis, because those things can actually play a role in helping to move these things along. I'll just leave it like that. But we do not have that Black male organization set up to the standpoint the way we need, or a Black political party or social economic party, if you will, however you want to organize that to talk on these issues. We don't have that yet. Nothing on the scale like a BLM.
No, I was going to say too, spinning something like that up just to get it in place. You got to think BLM started in response to Trayvon Martin, which was 2012, and it just hit critical mass here, 2020, so 8 years.
It really made a lot of momentum when they hijacked Michael Brown's "Hands Up, Don't Shoot." Right, that was the turning point for them. Yeah,
no, definitely that gave them momentum. But even you could argue then people sort of looked at them as kind of like, BLM people kind of ignore them. This George Floyd thing is, like you said, just it's just propelled them to a whole nother level. And it was kind of it was kind of confluence of luck, in the sense of someone pulled out a video, and it just happened to be just like someone else was saying, the perfect kind of symbolism to just explode something like this. My point just being, this is I think they kind of caught lightning in a bottle.
It's the perfect time, and it's catalyst for what they wanted to do. You had a lockdown, you had a pandemic, you had people out of work, and you had people glued to their devices, man, and they got live streamed. When Eric Garner was choked, and was on a live stream, it was a little bit different. People were at work, they weren't really paying attention to this. They didn't catch it until later. It didn't grow the legs fast enough. It didn't move at the same pace. This is different. That's why I said earlier, we've never seen anything like this before at scale. It moved beyond anything that we've seen before. And so, and it excludes Black men, right? So I don't know of a time like this in the last 50 years that where Black men are being excluded, while they're alive, but being leveraged, their bodies being leveraged as infrastructure while they're dead. And so I don't know of any movement that worked like that.
Yeah, the only thing I can even think of is like the Vietnam War, and that wasn't a movement. That was just kind of Black men kind of became cannon fodder for that because country wanted to. Yeah. And so, like I said, my experience in dealing with them and dealing with some other groups, we've been looking at this, and we've said something must be done. Now, a lot of those brothers want to crack some heads, and I'm one of the the few voices that says, nah, we have to think a little bit more strategic, and we have to take this from an asymmetric standpoint, because the momentum is just too much, man. It's just impossible for even.
Yeah, and cracking heads are not going to do. That's not going to do a whole hell of a lot. Well, what you need is large scale organization. You need a lot of national and international support. That's what happens. We saw this in the '60s. I was around, so I saw some of the dynamics of that. I was a kid, but my parents were deeply into this movement, and this was big in the '60s, and we saw stuff that we hadn't seen before. It changed the dynamics. This is very similar in how it's moving. What's different about it is how are some of the groups involved, and how this is affecting Black men specifically. They're riding this on our backs, but they're trying to take credit to kind of move things forward for themselves, like we did see in the '60s. Certainly Black people were killed and murdered and at levels that were the same here. Even worse, you had people being lynched and all that. You had anti-lynching bills that were being rejected and so forth. But yet this stuff was going on wholesale. So Black people went out and fought very heavily against it. And then the maximum beneficiaries of that did not really go to Black men either. Black women tended to get a bit more, and white women were the maximum beneficiaries of that as well. So even in those movements back then, we didn't maximize on it. And then we got mass incarcerated in the '70s, thrown in jail. So so that was their reaction to this after things settled down. So so we have to watch the dynamics of this as well and see how that plays out. But this is similar. We've seen stuff like this similarly, but not exactly the same. And how will it adversely affect Black men as it has done in history? Yeah, I believe that it will, unless we do properly organize. We have Black male organizations, and we need to start, hyping them up a lot more. I just know locally, politically here, we're talking about that a lot more. We're talking about that here locally, in my district. So, that's where we are. So anyway,
most of those Black male organizations you talking about, their leaders are already compromised.
Yeah.
Those leaders are compromised so bad you won't imagine. Anyway.
Well, if you talk about the 100 Black men,
we cannot go against we can't go against what's happening now. The only thing we can do is say you and I and Mike and other people in this sphere want to create another path, we have to wait until they fail, and they are going to fail. There's a
Yep.
reason why they are going to fail, because they have failed before, and they have failed before many times. And what you're trying to do, suppose you it's like us going to England now and trying to be part of the British Empire. The British Empire fell apart, and that's what's happening. You can't be part of something, you can't be stronger than what the organization that you're in that's falling apart. And if we are going to save ourselves, then we have to stand outside and watch what happens. And then when it happens, then we come in and say, look, this is our program. Either you're in it or you're out. That's it.
Yeah,
You can't
you gotta wait for them to overplay their hand,
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
which they will do.
We'll give Cyberline the last 90 seconds.
Thank you. Well, no, I think, like I said, I think the most important thing is to expose or draw out the differences that would be clear when made public. Obviously they have a mission. They have a playbook. They have something that they go by. And so, if what we're talking is opposition at the end of the day, no matter which way you spin it, no matter which way we term it or define it, it is an opposition. And so, if we're talking opposition, the best way to do that, like I said, is to put on Front Street the differences in terms of the lack of involvement of a certain segment of African-American men, akin to what the Black Lives Matter motto, mission, and movement is really about. And, whether that's, setting up shop alongside, the steaming train, or whether it's, taking alternatives such as going legislatively with agendas and so forth. At the end of the day, if people see the talking points and if people see what the mission is versus what the reality is actually about, and where the disconnects are and what the cost of those disconnects are, then you'll be able to have a successful campaign, and things will hopefully change for the better, and you'll be able to educate people and enlighten people.
Right. All right. Shalom to everyone.